Welcome to the Sunday show, the regular 2 p.m. middle of the dang day Sunday show right here on the line. I'm Matt Dillahunty, joining this week Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels. How are you today, sir? And
howdy, Matt. I'm pretty good. Yeah, it's I just got out of bed. Like last time I co-hosted, I'm just straight out of bed in front of the camera, not prepared, just drinking my coffee. So yeah.
See, that's the way to
How you
go.
doing?
I've already built a reptile enclosure, did a load and a half of laundry. The other half I'll have to finish after we're done with the other stuff. What else? I did something else. I sat around on my butt for a little while and did nothing, because you got to do that in preparation for the show.
Yep. Sounds productive.
So not only is this the Sunday show where all of you individuals out there who believe something that is either you think supernatural, something to tie to your religion, something about gods, etc., you get to call in and tell us what you believe and why, and we get to explain whether or not we agree or how. It may turn into a contentious back and forth, but oddly enough, it doesn't have to. And I'm going to make a special deal now. Y'all just heard Eric's fresh out of bed. Like, I'm sure the crust in the corners of his eyes has just been wiped clear right before we went live. So if you're if you're a theist and you call in and you say, I only want to talk to Eric, I'll let you do that. Probably for a while, at least, just to be as fair as possible. It'll help me stay in Zen mode until I can't. Eric's gonna flag
now
me.
is the time. Now is the time to throw a fast one by me. So because I
thought there was like a flag on the play right there. I thought you were gonna be like, actually, no, I don't want to have them only talk to me. I'm still not awake. But
I want them to talk to me because it'll wake me up faster.
I hope so.
Yeah.
We have one caller already that has a question for us. And just as a reminder, you can find out more about the network, more about the people involved, and all that stuff in the links below the description. You can go to patreon.com/calltheline to support us there. You can like and subscribe here, ring the bell. You can become a channel member. You can go to linemerch.com to find out more. And then there's additional things down there for PayPal and Cash App and all those things that, actually earn the channel money. But the most important thing you can do is to be here and participate, to engage in chat, and to spread the word, so that when 2:00 rolls around on Sunday, we don't just have one caller and for like the first 35 minutes, and then we get a bunch more of them and get too many to take. I want to have too many to take right from the get-go. Let me pull up the schedule for the upcoming shows here on the line. Sunday show after dark is going to be Aron Ra and John Gleason. And John's going to be back on Monday with Erika Gibbon on Skeptalk. And Tuesday's Chewed Gum is going to be Arden and Alyssa. Wednesday, it's going to be me and Arden doing our getting ready for a reptile expo right in the middle of Pride Month, with 20 other things going on. We're doing a show together because that's the way I like it. Transatlantic Call-In show is going to be Luxander and Dr. Ben on Thursday at 2. And then next Sunday show, believe it or not, Jimmy Snow, Erika Gutzik Gibbon. How can you ask for more next week? That's just going to be too cool. I have a reptile show thing we're going to be doing. Arden and I are getting ready to swab and run tests on 111 animals. That's
a lot of tests.
It is. And we're going the extra step, but I'm not here. It's Sunday. I'm not here just to talk about reptiles and other stuff. If you have a God belief or religious belief, something that you think you can actually defend, by all means, call in and defend it. We're going to start off with Tom in New York. Pronouns are he, him. Tom's an atheist who has a question about a phrase related to faith. So, Tom, you're on with Matt and Eric. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little fuzzy, but...
Good. Okay. Honored to talk to you, Matt. In my online atheism, I'm fond of using the phrase, faith is pretending to know things you don't know. And I follow that up sometimes with asking for an example of a faith-based belief that isn't a case of pretending to know what you don't know. And someone came back with a reply that had me stumped. That said, an agnostic theist will believe but doesn't claim to know. What do you think of that?
That's accurate.
That's accurate. So you don't agree with that saying that faith is pretending to know things you don't know?
No, I think the word faith has a number of different uses, and one of them might be possibly described as pretending to know things you don't know, but that's not my definition of faith. It's not. I mean, there's a faith like the Christian faith and, the Muslim faith, but faith isn't an act of pretending to know something. Faith is the excuse people give for believing things when they don't have a good reason. If you have a good reason, you don't make an appeal to faith. If you don't have a good reason, that's when you make an appeal to faith. So faith isn't the pretending. Faith is the potential justification for it.
Okay, but Peter Boghossian, who I stole that line from,
I don't give a fuck what Peter Boghossian says.
Okay. Is saying something like, I have faith Jesus will heal my sickness because it says so in Luke, would that be a knowledge claim in your opinion?
It's an expression of one's confidence.
Okay.
Whether or not, belief is just a state of being convinced that a proposition is true or likely true. Knowledge is a particular subset of belief, sometimes defined as justified true belief, but that one has problems as well. Generally, people, when they say I know, are just expressing an extreme confidence in a belief. I believe so strongly that it would be worldview altering to discover I'm wrong. But if somebody says, I have faith that God will heal me, all they're doing, in that sense, it's not epistemology. It is not anything else. It is just an assertion of confidence. They're just saying, I am confident Jesus will heal me. Why they're confident is the real issue. If they're confident because they have really good reasons and it's true, then there's no issue. If they're confident for bad reasons, then there's an issue.
And Tom, next time somebody does express that to you, that, I have faith that Jesus will heal me, or I have faith that I will see my loved ones in heaven, just ask them right back. Just say, are you willing to swap out that word faith with the word know or knowledge? Are you willing to say, I know Jesus will heal me. I know I will see my family one day in heaven. And put that statement to the test. Ask the person you're talking to.
That's a good approach.
What their real position on that is. Yeah. Because if they do say, yes, I do know that Jesus will one day heal me, or I do know I will one day be in heaven with my family. Now that opens up a whole field of questions you can ask. Basically, because I'm into street epistemology. So once somebody makes a knowledge claim, then you can start really putting it to the test whether or not they're justified in that knowledge. And that gives you many more conversation options rather than just sticking with this generally fuzzy word known as faith.
Well, okay. I guess I'll stop using that saying now.
It may come into play. It may come into play at different times. So what Eric's talking about, where when you ask somebody what they mean by that, you're going to get no shortage, especially of fundamentalist evangelicals who are eager to say, I know that I know that I know that I know that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Right.
And with a statement like that, all they're really saying is, I am aware that I am aware that I am aware that I'm incredibly confident that Jesus Christ is Lord. So you've got to ask the follow-up questions of, Right? Do you know this? What's your, what percentage confidence do you think you have in this? It is when I say something like faith is faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have good reason. I'm talking about if somebody says, "Hey, I believe this," and you ask them for justification and they don't have justification, that's when they make appeals to faith. And on that front, it's like, how could you possibly look at this as anything other than, I don't have any justification, so I'm going to stick this word in. And they're going to do it in part because, like, especially with Christians, I think is it Hebrews 11:1? I don't have my Bible app open yet.
Evidence of things unseen and all.
Yeah, where it talks about faith is the evidence.
Right.
And so that's a different usage of faith as well. Yeah, it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And that's essentially claiming that faith, which isn't well defined as more of just a conviction in that particular, that Greek word is pistis in Hebrews 11:1. And so that's credence or conviction. It is essentially my confidence is the essence of what I hoped for, and it's all I need, because they're not pointing to anything that is actually, or that would be considered evidence. They're saying that my confidence is itself the evidence.
I like looking at that scripture.
Me out on two issues.
With Hebrews 11:1, I know Bible scholars are going to jump down my throat about this, but when I read that evidence of things not seen, back then, for a century, the only real lines of evidence you had were the things that you directly experienced. They didn't have tools or science or anything like that. So I interpret that last line as the evidence of things not evidenced. I kind of see this whole thing as the whole concept as a contradiction. Because how do you have evidence when you are literally not looking at anything, and that's the only method you have to gather evidence? So as Matt said, it's really just this fluffy filler word that folks use because they don't have a good reason to believe, but they don't want to admit it. They want to prop up some special, supernatural, fuzzy feeling, wooish type, internal monologue that tells them that they're right, even though faith can be used to justify anything. I could have faith that something directly contradictory to Christianity is true, and there's no way for us to determine who's right and who's wrong about that. So it's a useless tool. Not even a tool. It's fluff.
Right. So it's not so much pretending to know as a substitute for knowledge.
Again,
probably put it that way. I mean,
it is contextual in what it actually means. If you look at Hebrews, the whole first, everybody points to Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. But if you that's in the King James. If you take a look at it in the English Revised Version, it says faith is what makes real the things we hope for. It is proof of what we cannot see. And it continues because verse 2 is, God was pleased with the people who lived a long time ago because they had faith like this. Faith helps us understand that God created the whole world by his command. This means that the things we see were made by something that cannot be seen. And so this opening kind of couple sentences from Hebrews is a very early attempt to not actually justify the term faith or faith as an epistemology or anything like that. It's just saying the faith we have, the confidence we have in this is good enough because this is how the elders received their commendation. Basically God applauded them for exercising this faith. And so if it was good enough for them, it was good enough for me. It's very much a give me that old time religion. I don't need anything other than the scripture and stuff. And so when we're starting to focus on, here's one word, faith. What does it mean? it's going to be different in a number of different contexts. And so there are going to be contexts where the sentence that you used before, faith is pretending to know things you don't know. I can think of loads of circumstances where that might completely fit, because what's often the case with individuals advocating for a religion, they are expressing a high confidence in something. When in fact they don't have knowledge. They're pretending to have knowledge that they don't actually have, because their understanding of what knowledge is different or weaker.
Okay. I think I get it now.
Well, cool. Then you can explain it to me later.
I don't think so. Thanks for your time, guys. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Tom.
Yep. Later, Tom. Have a good day.
So when you're advocating for kind of street epistemology methods like that, and you come across somebody who, well, it's going to be hard for me to put on my Christian hat and play the Christian, because I'm asking about somebody else's usage. When you engage with people who actually use the word faith, I find people are avoiding it, or seem to be avoiding it. You'll get people that point to Hebrews 11:1, but then for me, the most frequent time I hear a believer actually use the term faith is after we've tried to have a conversation about normative evidence. Like, what give me your explanation for your reasoning of what you believe and why. And when they get pushed into a corner, they'll assert that this is something you can't prove. You just have to have faith. That's the one that comes up most common. And to me, that's just a straight admission that as soon as they say this is something that can't be proven, I'm not talking about in terms of mathematics. I'm not talking about mathematical proof. I'm talking about the colloquial sense, where we're not even asserting 100%. It's just that we have a strong evidence base for this. When they're saying you can't have a strong evidence base for this, you just have to believe it anyway. That's how I got to faith as the excuse people give for believing when they don't have a good reason. What do you come across the most? Is it like that? Or are you running across individuals that might say, oh no, I have faith and it means this?
For the most part, if somebody goes straight into faith, then I start drilling into, like using methods like, okay, let's do the outsider test of faith. Let's pit your faith against another Christian's faith where you have like opposing viewpoints, like let's say like a Trinitarian versus a Unitarian. So if a person jumps straight into faith, then you can start picking apart faith and showing how it's just an unreliable method for coming to the truth, because it doesn't really, sure, it'll give you assurance, but it doesn't give you any real confidence, and it doesn't give you anything that you can give to anybody else. So it's useless as a tool. In the scenarios you mentioned, if you go through first lines of evidence and actual like rational discussion, then once everything we have for, let's say, like the resurrection of Jesus, let's say all the lines of evidence are defeated, and all of a sudden it goes to faith. Then that raises another question: why did that Christian rely on evidence first and then go to faith last? Because that implies that person values evidence more than they value faith. Because if they valued faith, they would have gone straight into that and said, I don't need evidence, I just need faith. But if they had attempted to go through evidence first to appeal to the rational mind, appeal to a rational conversation, and then they relied on faith once they ran out, then that tells us something about them. That tells us that they actually do value that evidence and they want that evidence, but now they don't have it. And then you can start talking about, well, like, hey, if you don't have that evidence and you're relying on faith, why are you believing? And then we can go into more conversation about, why faith isn't even very good as a fallback. So yeah, kind of both routes there, but both ways usually comes back to just showing that faith is just not a reliable method to use, because it can be used to justify anything. And if it gives you to justify anything, then it can't be used to justify anything.
This is part of, I had a moderate back and forth with someone named Michael on Facebook. So Michael, if you're watching, thanks. I'm not going to go through what he actually proposed, but it was him talking about a different way, or a potentially different way, of addressing the usage of faith as a label and as a foundation for some kind of epistemology. And he had, in his structure, he had things like faith-based evidence and and all this. And my whole take on this is really simple, which is there any position that can't be justified with faith? Whatever faith that person is exercising, whether they're using it as an epistemology itself, whether they're just throwing up their hands and saying, I don't need any evidence, I'm just going to take it on faith or whatever, however they mean it, what distinguishes the faith that they're exercising to reach the beliefs they have from using that same methodology to reach different, even competing and contradictory positions? If you can just have faith that Yahweh is the God, then why can't I just have faith that I can't even come up with another one off the top of my head right now. Why can't I just have faith that Zeus is not the one true God, or the leader of the gods? Or I can have faith in the entire pantheon. And so that's my thing: is there any position that can't be justified by faith? If you take it on faith that God is the good one and Satan is the evil one, could you take it on faith that bald people are smarter than everybody else? I mean, basically, my brain uses so much resources that there's not much left for hair. And so I'm just, my brain's just cranking at a better pace than everybody else's. I mean, there seems like there's almost evidence there, but I don't need any evidence. I could just take it on faith that bald people are just better. And in asking that, I mean, that's granted, I've never pretend that what I do is in exactly the same realm as street epistemology, because everybody who's done street epistemology stays much more calm than I'm going to be. The second I detect an outright lie, the zen is gone. But as long as there's like honest disagreement, I can write it out, which hopefully we'll see. We've got a bunch of callers lining up right now, atheists and theists. And Bill in New York, pronouns are he, him, has a question about abiogenesis. So you might have called the wrong show, Bill, but we'll see. Welcome.
Well, no. Hey, Matt. Hey, Eric. How you doing?
I'm all right.
Pretty good.
Okay. I don't know whether you had seen Lawrence Krauss's video, The Edge of Knowledge.
I haven't watched anything from Lawrence Krauss since Sam and I kicked him off the tour several years ago.
Okay. Well, I mean, irregardless of his personal situation, he made a statement in that thing. Most of it was on quantum mechanics, which kind of helped my kindergarten understanding of it. But he made a statement in there that we are so close on the abiogenesis thing that he wouldn't be surprised if it happened in our lifetime. Now, I don't know, they meant, within 20 years or whatever like that. And I hadn't really kept up on it. And because I know that's the last place that the theists try to stick God in, is right there. Darwin's proved everything else, but there's still that question. And when he said, well, we'll probably have the answers within our lifetime, I was like, gee, I didn't know they were that close. He also posited it's possible that it started from an asteroid from Mars depositing light or something here that sparked life, which, I guess that's a possibility too. But I didn't know, what you've heard about it, or if you've heard anything recent, Eric or Matt.
I don't keep up on abiogenesis research all that much. You might want to talk to Forrest Valkai. He's far more into that, and that's more close to him and his career than us. But I just look at abiogenesis, or Guts of Gibbon, yeah. I just look at abiogenesis as just a placeholder for something happened here that started life, and it doesn't imply anything specific, doesn't exclude anything specific. It's just a placeholder until we have more knowledge about what exactly happened at that moment, or whether it was a series of moments over thousands of years. But I mean, I can't really speak much about it because that's not my career field, and I'm woefully inept at talking about biology.
When it comes to abiogenesis, there's a number of things we know. It happened. Now, how it happened is the whole thing we're looking for. Is there a natural explanation? What are the potential natural explanations? Nobody's saying there's not necessarily a supernatural explanation. It's just that we don't know any way to rule it in. And so are we talking about, we've seen from the Milieu experiments and other experiments, Oro's experiments as well, that not only can the building blocks of life and self-replication occur through purely mechanical circumstances. But those things that are the building blocks of life. Now, the proteins in Miller-Urey experiment were essentially backward. So the issue isn't so much, can we show that abiogenesis can occur? To the large extent, we already have, in the sense that not only has it occurred by some means, but we've been able to demonstrate that something akin to it can arrive from natural circumstances, which is probably why Krauss and others wouldn't be surprised to find that we find the explanation in our lifetime. The problem, of course, is that we don't have a time machine. And if, in fact, the process by which life started on Earth is such that it didn't leave evidence that we can trace it back to its origin. So if we don't have a way of saying, yes, it was from sea vents and we've traced, microbes back to this because we don't have access to those sea vents, or that something about the circumstances of the ocean, the properties of the ocean have changed over those years. But also it could be, directed panspermia from an asteroid from another planet. And so if we were to find, for example, something distinct about life on Mars that mirrors something distinct about life on Earth, then the new model might be that either something on Earth attempted to I don't want to say attempted in a sense of thinking, either something from Earth potentially got to Mars and started something life like there, or vice versa, because the likelihood of the same type of life arising in two different planets in the same solar system is outrageous. So that might be Krauss. Well, that might be what Krauss is talking about. But I think if I had to guess, I think he's probably just expressing his optimism that science is still working on these issues, and there are some things that we seem to be getting closer to, but I don't have any new information on abiogenesis.
Yeah, and we may never have those answers either. I mean, we can only project and estimate what we'll discover in the future. We can see kind of what the scientific experiments we've been doing, Miller-Urey experiments, other experiments about how we're finding the building blocks of life in the galaxy, or in the universe rather. We can use the James Webb Space Telescope, and we can detect amino acids out in deep space. We can detect water out in deep space. We see trends in our research that seem to be leading towards, one day we'll figure out how abiogenesis works, or it might not happen. It depends on how things occur, and maybe abiogenesis is just such a rare thing that it happens very, very rarely in the universe, and we'll never be able to replicate it inside a lab. We simply don't know. All we can do is just basically take the current data that we have, the current tools that we have, and make our best guesses, and tentatively accept those guesses as reality until they're dethroned by better evidence, better tools, better methodologies. So yeah, one day, maybe not. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a good. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to add one more thing, that I do follow a lot of space stuff. So I watch channels like John Michael Godier and Isaac Arthur, and there's a lot of interest in certain planets in our solar system. Matt mentioned Mars. Venus is one of them. Enceladus, which I think is a moon of either Jupiter or Saturn, and I think also Pluto. They all have potential markers of evidence of life. So it would be interesting if we send probes there one day. Landers analyze soil, analyze chemicals on the surface, and it would be fascinating to see if we found life somewhere else in just our solar system. Even more fascinating if that life arose on its own, because if like as Matt said, if we find life on another planet in our solar system, we have life on this planet, and we analyze both, and we go, these are radically different, they aren't related. That means they both came from different sources. That would be phenomenal. That would probably blow the door open on life in the universe everywhere. So yeah, I watch that mostly from the astronomy, scientific, the astronomy, physics type angle, not really from the biology angle. So I do watch that, but we'll see one day. You never know.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, Bill. You too.
You too. All right. So it's an easy day here. We're all completely relaxed and
good vibes.
Just taking super easy questions, and I fully expect that'll continue for the whole day, don't you? We've got Mr. British calling, pronouns are he, him, and Mr. British says that he can prove the existence of his God. So which God are we going to prove here, Mr. British? Sorry? Whoa. There's something absolutely terrible about the audio. Can't understand a word you're saying. Okay. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to return you to the queue, and you can see if maybe a call screener can sort out what's going on. Because we can't. If you're so one of the things is
you have to call back.
Yeah. You can call the show at 720-619-2288, or you can go online and call in through callinstudio.com/show. There's a link down below here so that you can actually call in from your computer. And a lot of people do that. I can see when you're calling in from your computer versus actually calling in from a phone. Because if you call from a phone, I get a number. And if you call from your computer, we get an IP address type thing that it's at least being routed to. So we don't know what your personal computer's information is, but we can at least see which one it is. And so when it's all choppy like that, either your internet connection is a mess, our internet connection is a mess, or there's something related to your microphone setup in the machine. And we can demonstrate that. Here's Ray. Ray pronouns are he, him from North Carolina, who wants to talk about God and technology. Ray, you're on with Eric and Matt. How are you?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, sure deal. I've never been on any TV or anything. How's it going?
Okay. Your audio is a little mangled, but I can at least understand you. So what was it about God and technology that you were thinking about?
Well, let me switch rooms here, see if y'all can pick me up better. Well, hopefully this is better. If not, it's the best it'll get.
Hello, I think we can manage. Yeah.
All right. So what I wanted to say was, well, first of all, I'd called in last week, and that was the first time I heard this show when I came across it. And I was listening, and to be completely honest, I was getting a little frustrated hearing what y'all had to say. It was you and that other gentleman. I'm sorry, I don't know the names. Like I said, I just ran into the show, and I think it was Matt. Well, so what I wanted to do was call in and give my perspective on the whole thing and see if I can change y'all's mind.
Sure, we're ready.
So what is it exactly? What is your problem with the whole idea of a God? I guess is where we'd start.
My personal problem with it may be slightly different from Eric, but my personal problem with the very idea of a God is that there isn't sufficient evidence to believe that it's true. And my second problem is that for most of the ones that have been proposed, even if they were true, I have a problem with the notion that any God or being could be, should be worthy of worship. But the only issue that I really need to address is it true? Because if it turns out it's true, then whether or not I care about worshiping a God is just my preference. But my problem with it is that there's not enough evidence to think that it's true.
And I'm in pretty much with alignment with what Matt just said. I've yet to be presented with compelling evidence that a God exists. So I have the same problem with God that I have with vampires and unicorns and any other mythological creature. It's just, I don't think it exists. With the God, though, there's the added problem of lots of people believe that a God exists, and that's caused a lot of problems in our history. So kind of have like an added incentive to have issue with the whole God concept. But I mean, overall,
yeah, I have loads of problem with various religions for sure.
Yeah. But overall, just a general God concept, I don't have a problem with it. I just won't accept it as true until I'm compelled by evidence.
Yep.
Now, when you say there's no evidence, that I don't agree with. To say there's none at all.
I don't think either of us said that.
Yeah, I use my words very carefully there. I said there's no compelling evidence.
And I said there's insufficient evidence. Instead of trying to nitpick our words, considering this is your first time and I've done this for 20 years, why don't you just try to present evidence for God that you think should be compelling to us?
All right, fair. That's fair enough. And let me see how I want to approach this. I had wrote in the box about technology, and now I'm thinking if I present that, I don't think that's going to do the job.
That's probably the right call. If you don't think your evidence you're presenting is compelling, then yeah, I would probably not worry about presenting it.
For clarity, which God do you think is real? What do you know about that God?
Oh, I'm a Christian.
Okay. So what do you know about the Christian God and how do you know it?
Well, the Christian God I know from the Bible, from Scripture. I know from the teachings of the church. I know from my personal relationship. And I know from my studies of metaphysics. I know from, there's so many things that have revealed themselves to me, both in terms of knowledge and in terms of a personal relationship that I think goes beyond knowledge. I think if you have personal experience, that trumps knowledge, because knowledge, you can study all you want, but it's a different kind of experience when you experience.
Does your personal relationship involve back and forth communication with God?
In the sense of I can pray, I don't hear a voice back per se.
How is that a personal relationship? Everybody I have a personal relationship with is somebody that I can communicate back and forth with. So I don't understand a personal relationship where there's one-way communication.
Yeah, for example, if I let's say hypothetically I never met my father, but I would write my father letters every week, but I would never get any correspondence back my entire life, but I keep on writing. I wouldn't consider that a personal relationship.
There's no communication in the sense of a voice in my head let me be clear, but there is a communication through his actions and through his deeds.
So what I'm talking about here is you said there's a personal relationship. And now you're saying that the communication occurs through his actions and his deeds. Can you name one action that God has taken that you can demonstrate was actually God taking an action?
Well, let me think here. I don't want to pull out the first thing that comes to my head and get it shot down. I'd rather take my time, because y'all on the other side are probably way more prepared than I am, and I'm just being honest.
Yep. No.
Fair enough.
All of that is probably correct. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. Just Ray, while you're thinking of your best example, because I can think of, like, just to put you kind of in my mind space, like back to my analogy where I'm writing letters to my dad every week, my supposed father that I've never met, he never talks back to me. I could maybe identify things that happen in my life that I might attribute to him, but I would have no way of knowing. Like, for example, if I find a $5 bill on the ground, I can go, "Oh wow, this is great! I bet my dad left this here for me." Or if I get something if I get a present out of nowhere. Yeah. Well, my point is, before you counter that,
had wrote your dad a letter asking for a $5 bill on the ground, and you found a $5 bill on the ground.
Okay.
You think if I wrote my dad a letter asking for a $5 bill on the ground and I found a $5 bill on the ground, that would be sufficient evidence to conclude that my dad exists, heard my request, and fulfilled it?
Well, I think it's a start. It don't have.
I didn't ask if it was a start.
Right there.
I didn't ask if it was a start. So you've claimed to have a personal relationship with God. I've asked about the nature of that personal relationship and if there's communication. And you say that God communicates through his deeds. And I've now asked you, what deed or act can you present that is confirmed to be from a God? Just one, because I'm not aware of any. And so, if Eric writes his dad and says, Dad, I love you, and I want you to please send me a special message. And Eric doesn't know who his dad is. He's never interacted with his dad. And he tunes into the nightly news, and an older gentleman is on the news, reading the news, and tugs at his ear. And Eric concludes that man is his dad sending him a message. Does Eric have sufficient evidence to reach that conclusion?
I didn't understand the question, sir, and I'm just being honest. And maybe you can run it by me one more time.
If Eric sends a letter tries to send a letter to his dad that he's never met and says, I need you to show me a sign that you love me. And while watching the news, an older gentleman tugs at his ear, and Eric concludes that older gentleman is his father sending him a message. Is that a reasonable conclusion for Eric to make?
I would say no in that example, because it's no.
And yet you say no, and I agree with you. And yet there's a real person there that's doing something. So if I were to ask Eric, hey, can you give an example of what deed or act your dad did that is confirmed to be an act from your dad? He could say, well, he tugged his ear on a show one night. And I was like, yeah, but I agree that person exists, but how do you know that's your dad? And he said, because he was answering my request for him to show stuff. Eric would be doing the same thing that many theists do, except that he'd be doing it with someone we know exists. You're doing it with someone we don't even know exists. And so I still am waiting, if God is communicating with you through his actions, why is it so hard to come up with one action that we can all confirm is from a God?
Well, I think the difficulty is when you are so critical on the other end, and you're not looking to accept something, then I need to dig deep and find something that's really going to knock.
Ray, I'm asking you to present a piece of evidence to support your claim. Are you really coming back to say that it's difficult because you think I'm not willing to accept it?
No, I'm not saying you're not willing to accept it.
Then don't bring up how critical I am when I haven't been critical with you at all. But how critical I am is irrelevant to whether or not you can present one single example of a God doing anything. It's not my fault or Eric's fault that you can't do this. Maybe it's God's fault.
Yeah, Ray, do you have an example analogous to the $5 bill thought experiment? Like, do you have something similar to that? Okay, lay it on us.
So I had a dog a few years ago, and let me just give this to you quick. And he had been diagnosed with cancer, and we prayed on it, and we spoke to God on it. Come to find out he had recovered, and we didn't need no surgery. We didn't need no anything.
Okay. Do you understand that cancer sometimes is misdiagnosed and that cancer sometimes goes into remission?
Oh, I do, but you could have seen him. He was in the kind of shape that you wouldn't have any doubts looking at him.
Well, Ray, I would absolutely have doubts because I'm not a vet. Are you a vet?
I'm not, but we spoke to one.
Sure. And do vets always diagnose animals correctly?
I'm not sure if they do or they don't.
Well, they don't.
Imagine.
They don't always get it right. Nobody gets it always right. But how did you rule out an incorrect diagnosis? What did you do to rule that out?
I just looked at him, and you could look at him and see what he was going through, and here's the thing, whether it was cancer or it was something else, he was in the kind of shape that he was ready to go within a couple weeks, a couple months.
Yeah.
So
Ray, I'm gonna let Eric jump in because I'm about to cross over into non-Zen mode because it's incredibly frustrating for me to hear someone express so much confidence in the face of so much ignorance. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm not remotely saying anybody's stupid, but neither you nor me are qualified to diagnose cancer in dogs. The vet may be, and the vet may or may not have gotten it right. And when I asked you what you did to rule out that it was wrong, which is only step one, because even if we have a correct diagnosis, cancer sometimes goes into remission. And even if there was cancer and the cancer went away, you have no way of demonstrating that it was a God doing that. So what you've done is you've said, here's a circumstance where I don't have enough information to reach a conclusion, but I'm going to reach a conclusion anyway. And then something happens and you don't have any way of demonstrating that the conclusion you want to be correct, that God saved your dog, is true, but you're going to believe it anyway. That's an incredibly frustrating thing for me to deal with. And I think Eric probably has a different line of questioning or different path to go down that might be more helpful. So I'll leave it to Eric.
Yeah. So Ray, let's rewind back to the claim where you said that your evidence that you have a personal relationship with God is that you had a dog a few years ago. It got cancer. Yeah, one line of evidence. You got cancer, you prayed, and it recovered. For a moment, just pretend that you're incorrect about God did anything. Let's say God didn't do anything. In reality, God didn't actually help your dog recover. What other explanations can you come up with as to why your dog recovered? Matt gave you a couple. You can use those if you want, but just for a fact, just for a moment, pretend.
I've never seen someone go from the shape that he was in to recovered. I've never seen that personally.
All right,
which is why
Ray, answer my question though. All right, for a moment, let's say you know for a fact God didn't intervene for your dog. What other explanations would explain the phenomenon you saw?
Well, I think that's a flawed question because I could say, pretend for a moment that God did, God did, and I could win the argument that way. So I would rather not go.
So Ray,
down
this
that
is not an argument.
Line of question.
Ray. All right, Ray, this is not an argument we're having here. I'm asking you for alternative explanations. I'm perfectly fine to put on the table that, sure, it's possible a God intervened for your dog. I'm trying to determine whether that's likely or not. So we have one explanation that you put forward, and that's God did it. And I'm asking you what other explanations are on the table that we have not eliminated yet. Just give me one. Matt already gave you probably two, I think, if I remember correctly. But just you give me one. What's some alternative explanation?
All right, fair enough. I see what you're trying to get at. And I'm trying to remember what the other gentleman said.
You don't have to remember what Matt says. Just give me one of your own. It's much better if it comes from you. So, for example, I got sick last week. I didn't really get sick last week, but let's say I got sick last week. I had COVID. I was on the couch. I was feeling like I was half dead. No prayer. just some rest and some medicine, and I got better. What's the explanation for why I got better? Did God do it?
That's not. You can't compare that to cancer.
Sure, you can. It's an illness. It's analogous.
You can't. You're not going to sit there on the couch and you're not going to take some Tylenol and wake up from cancer, and go to work the next day.
Dude, let's say a year ago I had cancer. I was in the hospital. I had cancer, and before I even started treatment, it got better. What's the explanation?
Well, I think one thing I do know is that if you had just got it, it might not have grown. As far as I know, cancer grows, and it might have stopped growing.
Yeah, cancer both grows and shrinks. Cancer both grows and shrinks. It's called remission. So, but here's the thing, though. Okay, I didn't pray to a god. I had cancer. I didn't pray to a god. Didn't appeal to any higher being or anything like that, and I just got better even before treatment started. What's the explanation? What's some possible explanations? Because whatever explanations you posit for my recovery can equally be applied to your dog. So give me one alternative explanation other than a god.
I see what you're getting at.
Then answer the question.
Please. And we're assuming that you didn't pray.
I'm telling you didn't pray.
And that's the problem with the question, because we don't know the alternate if you had prayed, and we can't test it that way.
Ray, so you are missing the point.
You never know whether other people prayed or not. Eric's telling you he did not pray. If it is in fact the case that he did not pray, answer the question.
Just give me one alternate explanation other than God. Anything.
And we've gone through a few of them, but let me add in this. You don't know if God will intervene
Ray,
without the prayer.
I've asked you, Ray, I've asked you 4 times. Ray, I've asked you 4 times. This is my final time I'm asking you, because if you don't answer it, I'm just going to tell you the answer, because I'm trying to help you think for yourself here. What other explanation, anything that's possible, can you give me for my recovery from cancer? Anything.
I suppose it could have shrunk.
Remission. Spontaneous remission, right? That's what Matt said earlier.
But you don't know if God's behind that or if he isn't.
That's
correct.
The whole point
and neither do you, Ray, and
that's the problem right there.
Neither do you, Ray, and that's the problem. We're not claiming to know whether or not God's behind it. You are.
So, Ray, I'm going to lay it out for you very cleanly here, okay? Spontaneous remission happens. There's lots of people who get cancer, do not pray a single word to any god, and get better, even before treatment starts. There are explanations such as misdiagnosis. Maybe the doctor mixed up x-rays. Maybe the doctor mixed up blood tests and blood work, and they gave one patient's diagnosis to another patient. This stuff happens. These are all perfectly rational, even, I would say, common occurrences that happen in our world. We have 8 billion people on the planet. We have millions of doctors. We have millions of cases of cancer and other illnesses. These things happen. But then occasionally, this will happen with somebody who's religious, and instead of attributing the explanation to these natural explanations, they say a god did it. And that's without justification. So getting all the way back to your dog here, how do you know that your dog didn't just spontaneously go into remission? How do you know that your vet didn't mix up x-rays or blood work? How do you know you're just not misremembering conversations that happen, and you're recalling it in a way that frames your God in a better light? How can we eliminate these natural explanations in order to accept your God explanation?
Because I'm taking it as a holistic. I'm taking every experience I got, not just the dog situation, but I'm taking it all holistically. And I'm understanding that the relationship with God exists in the same way. If you write your dad and he's been answering you back, the next time you write him, you're not going to say, let me prove that this is my dad. You're going to assume that this letter that came from your dad's address is from your dad.
If somebody's been writing their dad and their dad's been writing them back, that's two-way communication. That is not what we discussed. You're writing your dad and your dad never writes back. Your dad may be dead. You have no reason to think that your dad exists at all anymore. You are writing letters to your dad. You are getting nothing back. And when your dog gets better, you credit dad. When your dog gets better, you credited your dad without a single shred of evidence for it.
And Ray, when you say holistic, I imagine you're saying this is a preponderance of all your experiences. You've done stuff like this several times. This has occurred to you many, many times, and you have identified enough of these occurrences, like your dog losing its cancer without treatment. You're saying, oh, a bunch of these things have happened, and that gives me confidence. Gives me evidence that I need that a God exists. But my question, it covers all of that. Now we're into confirmation bias territory, possible confirmation bias. How do you know you're not just emphasizing the hits and ignoring the misses in your life? How many times have you prayed for something and it didn't happen? How many times have you prayed for something and the opposite happened? How many times have things go completely bad for you, completely sideways, and you just let God off the hook for those things? Like how can we possibly determine that this is actually a real line of evidence, or you're just picking and choosing and cherry picking your experiences in order to support your preferred conclusion?
Why did God heal your dog but not my grandfather?
And where did the cancer come from, for that matter?
Yeah, why'd your dog get cancer in the first place? And why'd your dog get cancer in the first place?
I don't necessarily think that, a God would have to heal everyone in order to heal someone.
Of course not. So fuck my grandpa, we need to heal your dog.
No, it's not. It's not.
Which one is more valuable? Which one is more valuable, my grandpa or your dog?
Well, let me ask you this. Did you pray?
No, let you answer my question. Which one's more valuable, my grandpa or your dog?
I don't think it's about value. I think
which one is more valuable? Which one is more valuable, my grandpa or your dog?
Ray, if you were in a burning building and your dog, Ray, if you were in a burning building, your dog was there and Matt's grandpa was there, who would you save? You can only save one.
If my dog and what was
Matt's grandpa.
And Matt, why is it so difficult for you to follow an incredibly simple question? The house is on fire. Your dog is in one room. My grandpa is in the other room. You have time to rescue one of them. Which one are you going to rescue?
Well, because I'm not familiar with the name. So when you say Matt's grandpa, I don't know Matt from Tom.
Okay. Matt is the host of today's show. My name is Eric.
Fuck that. Ray, listen to me. Who's more valuable, Matt's grandpa or Tom's grandpa or Susan's grandpa or Jennifer's grandpa? What fucking difference does the name make? It doesn't matter whose grandpa is in there. If there's a grandpa in one room and a dog in the other, which one are you fucking rescuing?
Well, the question doesn't have the details.
Are you rescuing, Ray? Which one are you rescuing?
A Nazi soldier.
Okay, I'm going to mute you because you might be the most dishonest fuck I'm going to run into today, and I'd rather not lose my zen too much because now you're suggesting that there might be a Nazi in the building. You dishonest son of a bitch, Ray. I'm going to ask you right now, a dog's in one room, a human fucking being is in the other room. Which one do you rescue? If you say anything other than dog or human being, you will never be allowed to call while I'm on the show again. Dog or human being, who are you rescuing?
Hello?
Dog or human being, who are you rescuing? Goodbye. We patiently went through this. Ray is incredibly frustrated by what he heard on last week's Sunday show, so he wants to call in for the first time ever and try to defend a God.
I caught that too.
Despite the fact that he called last week, he said.
Yeah. Ray, I want you to reflect on that conversation and why answering very simple questions is so difficult. Because I suspect, Ray, that you are smarter than you just presented yourself. I think you can, once you hear the question, you know where the question is going, and you don't like where the question is going. That's why you accuse us of asking the wrong questions or asking dishonest questions or however you framed it, asking us.
Being too critical.
Being too critical. Like, Ray, you know where these conversations are going because you are a logical thinking person. And the fact that you are wanting to be dishonest like that, wanting to evade questions, wanting to kind of just block and kind of obfuscate the conversation with these tactics, it tells us a lot about you. It tells us that you prefer your conclusion more than actually getting to a conclusion based on evidence and truth. And it's very frustrating. Yes, when you're in a burning hospital, you're going to rescue the human. If all else being equal, dog and human that you know nothing about, you're going to rescue that human. At least I hope you would. And the fact that you can't answer such a question because you know that that's going to lead to, well, why didn't your God help this human and help your dog instead? Why did your God in that situation save the dog rather than the human? You know that's going to put you and your God in an awkward position, and you don't like that. And it's very, very frustrating. But reflect on that, Ray. See if you can ask yourself those questions when you're by yourself, when you're not in front of an audience, when you're not in front of two assholes like us, just drilling with questions. Ask yourself and honestly reflect about that, why you did this. Because I don't think a God that is real or a God that is honest or a God that is virtuous needs somebody to use these tactics to defend them.
Yeah.
I'm a little frustrated now. I'm going to drink my drink.
Yeah. So yes. Is Zen mode gone? No, it's back. But Zen mode goes away. Here's the thing. That was utterly dishonest. We sat here patiently having a conversation. We tried to ask the simplest questions. And granted, I don't mean that in the sense that it's easy to come up with an answer for why, if you think that God heals people and God heals your dog and doesn't heal my grandfather, you've got some splaining to do. You've got some thoughts to consider. It doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. None of that is in any way a demonstration. I wasn't presenting it as if it proves that God doesn't exist. It's there to try to see what Ray can explain about his God. Because Ray, you go back and listen to the call, Ray's confidence and frustration from the outset was obvious. He called in last week, but he'd never called into a show before. But I think what happens is he didn't get through last week, but he tried to call in because he was frustrated at what was being said. So cool. No lie there for anybody who was confused about that dishonesty. That's the charitable way of looking at it. Ray called, but didn't get through. He'd never called into a show before, so this is his first time. He wanted to talk about God and technology and trying to believe in the modern age, but instead he claimed that he's a Christian because of the Bible, the teachings of the church, personal relationship, and his studies of metaphysics. Now, we'll set aside studies of metaphysics because, we didn't get into that at all. And I skipped over the Bible and the teachings of the church because Ray was a fan of personal relationship being more important than evidence, which is already a problem. It's a huge problem. There's potential biases there. I like Eric more than I like Ray. I'm going to treat Eric better than I treat Ray by default. If the building's on fire and Ray's in one room and Eric's in the other, I'm saving Eric. It's frustrating. I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody. If Ray's in one room and there's a dog in the other, I'm saving Ray. It's just the way it is. Yeah. There are people who would say they would save the dog first, and cool, whatever it is that you use to come up with that model. But when you say you have a personal relationship with a God, there has to be communication beyond just you keep sending letters that never get replied to. And if you keep sending letters that don't get replied to, and then your dog appears to get healed, you don't get to credit God with that. That is less plausible than the scenario I came up with where Eric credits Tom Brokaw or whoever on the nightly news for sending him a message, because at least then we know that person exists. We don't even know that the thing you're trying to credit your dog's healing with exists at all.
Yeah. And that's what I was getting at with my conversation with Ray was basically like, you can ask 100 different things, 20 different things, 10 different things. One comes true. What evidence is that something actually responded to you? So sure, I could write a letter asking for $5 to my dad, and I find $5 on the street. Sure, my dad could be there. My dad could have left $5 on the street. I don't know how he would do that, but sure, it's possible. Or maybe somebody intercepted the letter and dropped $5 for me. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Or maybe I have incorrect memories about it. Or maybe I'm just lying about it. Like all kinds of plausible, naturalistic explanations. And Ray, the whole point of the conversation when I was asking you for alternative explanations other than your God was basically to get you to think, okay, what am I out of hand eliminating as possibilities without justification? Because you have a preferred conclusion. Your preferred conclusion is your God exists and your God listens to you. You said so yourself. But my question to you is, how do you know that that's in fact the case and there's not some other explanation, more plausible, more possible, that can account for all the evidence that you're simply overlooking? Yeah, it's frustrating. That's what street epistemology is all about. Is to get you to justify your belief. And I'm sorry, you did not justify your belief. You all you did was obfuscate and frustrate, and it doesn't reflect well on you. It doesn't reflect well on the God you believe in. I suggest next time answer the questions directly. And if you think we're laying a trap for you, who cares? Walk into it. I'll even admit if I'm gonna lay out some questions for you because I want to get you into a corner, I'll even tell you straight up, yeah, I'm gonna lay a trap for you. Walk into it. Let's have some fun with it. We're not here to beat you up. We're here to get to the truth.
I'm getting ready to do a video on trick questions because there are no trick questions. And what happens is when somebody like Ray thinks I see where you're going with that question. Let me see if I can find a way to circumvent it. You're now no longer engaging honestly. You have seen where the previous questions are going to wind up leading you, and you don't like it. So you find a way to try to thwart it, which is why, do you save the dog or do you save my grandpa? Well, I don't know whose grandpa that is. Okay. Does it matter whose grandpa it is? Well, it could be a Nazi. At that point, Ray, literally no one should consider continuing a conversation with you because it's not a good faith conversation. You were backed into such a corner and had no way of finding a way out. And so you just flailed around. It's not a good thing. Let's try something else. We've got Allison in Nevada, who is spiritual and says that she can prove the existence of an intelligence that's communicating with us. So Allison, how do we do that? How do we prove there's an intelligence? Like, I think there are plenty of intelligences communicating with me. What do we know about this one you're going to prove?
Interesting question. Can I ask you a quick question, though? Because I've been listening to this conversation we've been having, and I found myself wondering if you would just present to me, for the conversation's sake, what your explanation. I believe you're an atheist argument. You're on the side of the argument of atheism. Will you tell me what your explanation is for at least just like the consciousness of the universe, so that I can know what I'm working with?
I don't think the universe is conscious, but if it was conscious, I don't have to have an explanation.
Okay, fascinating. So you don't believe that it's conscious. Well, that kind of stops the whole conversation about God right there.
I believe there's consciousness in the universe. I don't believe the universe is conscious.
Okay, so when it comes to the evidences that I have, let me tell you, first of all, I didn't study the Bible, wasn't studying religion. I'm actually more of a scientist, researcher type. And so the information came to me, and so that's why it actually moved me. But I'm not the kind of person that talks about prayer and a personal relationship with God, because and I don't have this image in my mind like God's a savior.
Allison,
or
it'd be really Allison, it'd be really useful if you didn't spend so much time telling me all the things you don't believe and aren't about, and just started making the case by explaining what intelligence you're going to prove and how you prove it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I could, so many of them. One of them is a photograph that was taken of a dark night sky, and underneath the light is a language that is color cubes and can be deciphered if an artificial intelligence was to look at it and put the information together. That's one example of an intelligent
colored cubes. Sorry, say that again. You have a photograph of the night sky, and under a certain light, you can see colored cubes, and you interpret that as a language.
You're hilarious. So you totally took what I just said and twisted it.
I'm asking for clarification.
Allison,
if I'm misrepresenting you, tell
I'd be
me.
more than happy to clarify for you. Oh, no, I'm more than happy to clarify for you because I don't like being taken wrong.
Allison.
Yes, sir?
I could play back what you said. I asked
Let's
you.
do it. No, I'm not going to argue with you. Listen, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to answer
would
your
you
question.
stop interrupting me?
Allison, pump the brakes.
apologies,
Let us
sir.
talk. Pump the brakes. All right.
Excuse me?
I asked you.
guys are hilarious
what.
people.
Shut the fuck up.
Oh my gosh, this is beautiful. I'll tell you why it's beautiful because you're.
No, you're not going to tell me shit. I'm muting you. Allison, I asked you, what intelligence are you going to demonstrate and how are you going to do it? And you said you have many evidences, and one of them is a photograph of a dark night sky, and underneath the light are cubes that is a language of colored cubes. Eric interrupted to make sure that he understood that. All we're trying to do is get you to say, oh my God, you were talking the whole time you were fucking muted.
No,
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you, Allison? I don't have to have any fucking respect at all. This is our show. We are being respectful. We are asking you to make your case, and you are blabbing when nobody can literally hear you. Talk all you want right now. You're fucking muted. Nobody can hear you. If you would like to make your case for things, then all you have to do is answer the question. And the question from Eric was this: are you claiming that you have a photograph of a dark sky and that there is a language of colored cubes in the photograph? Is that what you were claiming? Is that what you were claiming? Is that what you were claiming? I'm going to fucking mute. Okay, you're muted again, Allison. We're going to teach you how to actually have a respectful conversation with other people. Every time I unmute you and you're talking about something else, I'm going to mute you again. And when it happens 3 times, I will drop you and you won't get to say anything on this show. But if you'd like to actually defend your case and make a case that there's an intelligence trying to communicate with us, we're happy to let you do it. Right now, I'm not convinced there's an intelligence on the other end of this phone. So Eric's question was, and I'm going to ask this again, were you saying that you have a photograph of a dark night sky and underneath the light is a language of colored cubes? Is that what you were saying?
What's your email address? And I'll send it to you. So we can
Goodbye. I'm not even going to wait 3 times.
Wow.
You're just sitting there yelling, give me your email address and I'll send it to you. I genuinely think, that is a call that we should not take again.
That was kind of reminiscent of, I have no idea if Allison was going to go this direction or not, but there was a flat Earth guy who was analyzing images of the Earth taken from one of the, I think Apollo missions. And he identified colored squares in the picture, which was proof that NASA had fabricated these photos, and turns out it was just JPEG artifacting, just something that happens from compression of internet images. Yeah. I was wondering if Allison was going to go that direction, but that's why I was asking for clarifying questions. Like, this is what you're saying to me, right? Because
give Allison your email address and she'll send you the picture.
Yeah.
Problem
Allison,
here is
skeptics and scoundrels at gmail.com. Send me those images. I want to see what they look like.
So we already know there's a delay. There's a delay between me and Eric, which we have to dance around. There's a delay with the callers. I get that. But when we put somebody on hold, on mute, nobody can hear them, but they can still hear us. And there's a little beep there. If you're not willing to let us use the mute button to try to manage the call in a way we can actually make sense out of it, then we're just going to drop you. It's bad enough when somebody doesn't know anything at all about having a conversation, so they're just going to try to interrupt and keep going while I'm trying to clarify and ask a question. It's worse when they're Allison. All right. Jay, I guess it's Minnesota?
Yeah. Hey, hang on, let me get you up my speakerphone. I got a cat bothering me.
I got a cat bothering me sometimes too, just not today.
I got mine locked out right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Jay wants to address the question of whether or not there's a God. So, Jay, you're on with Eric and Matt.
Yeah.
How are you?
Doing okay. Okay, so first of all, the title of your call-in is there a God? Prove it. What kind of evidence are you looking for exactly? Let me ask you that.
It depends on the nature of the claim.
Well, you're looking for evidence of God or gods. What kind of evidence are you looking for?
It depends on the nature of the claim.
What's the nature of the claim for life in the universe that we're searching? That we're searching for?
There is life. There is life in the universe. There is life in the universe.
We don't know that.
I'm alive.
We don't know that. We don't. Well, no, that's life on Earth. What's life elsewhere in the universe?
Are you saying that
for with the James Webb telescope?
Okay, so
that's
you're
what we're
asking
doing with the James Webb telescope, aren't we?
Can I?
Is that what we're doing with the? Okay.
Why can't I? Why is it?
I'm sorry.
Why is it?
Let me apologize.
Right, never mind. Okay. I'm going to mute you. I don't know why this is so frustrating. I need you, Jay, when I unmute you, to tell me what God you're going to advocate for, and then we can let you know whether or not we have any sort of specific types of evidence that might be acceptable. But at the end of the day, for most of the God claims, my answer has been consistent over the years, which is, I don't know what would convince me, but if there is a God, that God should definitely know what should convince me and should be capable of providing that evidence. I'm not going to sit here and answer speculative questions about what sort of evidence would you want for this? What sort of evidence would you want for that? Either you have a belief and you are willing to defend it, or you don't. That's the issue. So do you, Jay, have a God that you're willing to advocate for? And what sort of evidence can you present for it?
Okay, let me apologize for interrupting you. Okay, I am sorry for that.
Okay.
My question is, I want to know what kind of evidence. Okay, I'm a Christian. I want to know what kind of evidence you are looking for.
And I can't tell you that. Did you not listen to what I just said while you were on hold?
Yes, I listened to it.
Jay, let me reframe what Matt just said.
You don't know.
Correct.
So Jay,
I don't know.
Let me reframe what Matt just said, okay? So you just said you're a Christian, but before you mentioned that's when Matt gave his explanation. If you're positing a deistic God, one that doesn't at all intervene in the ongoings of the universe, and there's probably no evidence you can give me that will convince me of that, because it doesn't modify or change anything in the universe. If you posit a God that 100% reliably answers prayers, then the evidence that would convince me of that, or at least get me a lot closer to it, maybe not quite over the finish line, but a lot closer, would be to actually test that and do numerous prayers for numerous different things with controls and such, and see if that claim holds up and if that evidence supports the claim. So it depends on the God you're positing. You just said you're a Christian, so that gets us closer to the God you're positing. There's a lot of Christian gods, a lot of versions of the Christian God, rather. So you need to narrow us down to what's the God that you believe in, and then perhaps we can start talking about evidence that might convince us of that. Maybe.
One last thing, Jay. One last thing. I know you're ready to go, Jay. The only thing that matters is, hang on. The only thing that matters is what convinced you, and why do you think that should also convince us? It doesn't matter whether I know what can convince me. You became convinced, and you either have good reasons to be convinced or you don't.
Okay. I will just say, I will say this. What Eric just said is that, according to what Eric just said, is that whatever I will say will move him closer, but it will not prove God. So your entire video title, Is There a God? Prove It, is completely meaningless, and your entire.
Okay, I'm going to mute you, Eric. I'm going to mute you, Jay. It's becoming clear that you don't have any actual interest in having a conversation about whether or not there's God. You probably seem, oh, you hung up and you ran away. You hung up and you ran away because you're objecting to the fact that on the show, in the title, which is put there by the producer in order to inspire calls, just not you, Jay. We're not trying to inspire people like you to call in. We want people who call in who can actually say, I'm convinced a God exists. Here's why I'm convinced. Here's why I think you should be convinced too. And then we can say, I see what you're talking about with a God. I see why you're convinced, but I have some problems with it. And here's why I'm not convinced. And we can discuss essentially competing epistemologies. At no point is the title of this show, Is There a God? Prove It, an attempt by us to ask for something that we won't accept. Neither is it proof in a mathematical sense that we're looking for. What we're saying is there a warranted belief in a God? We're just using the colloquialism prove it. And since Jay was completely unequipped to have that sort of conversation and just wanted to try to talk over me because he was desperate to get to his point to say, ha ha ha, I've just shown that the message you guys put at the top of your show can't be true. Your whole show is a lie. You are not willing to have people present evidence because you won't accept it. Here's the thing, Jay. You became convinced of a God for some reason. I'm sorry that you know it's a bad reason. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you absolutely know that it's a bad reason, which is why you wouldn't give us the reason that you believe. You wouldn't say, here's why I believe in God, and I think you should too. You're sitting there in your embarrassment, toiling with the recognition that you have accepted something for really bad reasons nobody should accept, and that you are not properly equipped to actually defend why you believe. And that's why, instead of calling in to actually defend what you believe, which is the purpose of the show, you called in to try to make some kind of point about the title of the show. Well, you know what? I can change the title of the show. Can you change whether or not you actually have evidence to warrant belief in a God? Because I'll bet you can't. But thanks for running away, Jay. You and your God are on the weakest footing.
Where would a pedantic discussion about the title of a YouTube live stream get us anyway? Like, we'll say, okay, we'll word it better next time. Like, how does that all affect the conversations being had here?
Multiple times. It's happened multiple times in the last week. I've heard callers call into shows talking about, why did you say, is it prove God, prove. Well, here we go.
I think what a lot of people don't understand is that titles have to be catchy. And I don't want to use the word clickbait. It might be a little clickbaity, but it's what gets attention. It's what gets people to click on it. And we have fun here. We have good discussions. We're in a search for truth, but at its core, the line is a business. People have to make their living off of this thing. They have to make business decisions about things. And if that means making a catchy title that's not necessarily 100% accurate, but does the job of getting people in here to talk to us, then so be it. It's a pragmatic trade-off. And you can point that out all you want, but it doesn't change anything.
But this is going to fry Jay's mind because caller John in Utah says he has proof of God. Now, instead of us saying, digging in on whether this is a mathematical proof or absolute proof or whatever else, John, just let us know what God you're advocating for and what you think your proof of it is. Welcome to the show.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, John.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't actually necessarily have proof of God. I'm more so interested in discussing.
Okay, hang on. So first of all, for everybody who calls in, you don't have to do a hello, can you hear me? You can start talking and we'll either respond by letting you know that we can hear you or objecting or whatever else. But John, if you call in and you say you have proof of God, and then I tell everybody that John says he has proof of God, and we set you live, and the first words out of your mouth after can you hear me are, I don't actually have proof of God. What is it you think we should do with that?
Sorry, when I called in, it just says topic or question, and I just put proof of God. I was more so interested in discussing.
Did you talk to a call screener? Did you talk to a call screener?
Yes.
Did you tell the call screener that you had proof of God?
I think. All right. I think I did. My apologies.
Why did you lie to the call screener to get on a show? Why do you think I should continue to let you talk if you're just going to lie? What God are you representing that you think lying is the right way to start?
I suppose you're right. I apologize. I just thought we could have a discussion about what constitutes the proof of God, and it was a vague answer I gave to the topic or question.
Call back another day. I got zero patience for liars. You don't have to lie to get through to the show. If you want to have a conversation about what should qualify as proof of God, we kind of just did that. Like Eric gave some examples of things that would move the needle for him. If you think there's a God that answers a prayer 100% of the time, then demonstrating that that's the case would move the needle. However, we already know that in tests done by the Templeton Foundation on intercessory prayer and others, there's been no example that any God has ever answered prayer at any rate above a coin toss. And if you don't have a rate above a coin toss, then you have no demonstrable phenomenon. So despite the fact that there are people all over the planet with different gods, thinking that their gods are curing their pets or healing glaucoma, or fixing the cataracts of Sam's mom, for all of you Tim Minchin fans, despite the fact that all those people think that, there isn't evidence to conclude that prayers are being answered at any identifiable rate. And so Eric gave an example of something that definitely moved the needle. There are some glib proposed evidences of God, like writing in the sky that could be read simultaneously by everybody. I think that would be incredibly impressive. The problem is that, as Arthur C. Clarke pointed out, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so if there's a technological way of doing that, then we can't say, ooh, that was done by a God, because we don't have a way to rule out the technology. Mm-hmm. What happens with a lot of people who are calling in and wanting to talk about proof, as was the last caller, is they suggest that Eric and I have somehow flawed standards. We're expecting too much. You know, the sort of thing that we would want to have isn't something that God's willing to do or likely to do. My problem is that every example I could give could just be technology that I'm unaware of. And the humility of recognizing that is a good thing. It keeps me from being gullible. But for the believers, they're like, oh, you're just too skeptical. Well, first of all, I don't think you can be too skeptical. I think you're just skeptical, and there's sufficient evidence or there's not. But if in fact we live in a world where there is a God, and that God created this world, then that God set up all the rules, including the rules by which we evaluate how likely something is to happen and whether or not we have evidence to point to a causal connection between two things. Theists are saying that their God intentionally created us, limited our ability to investigate and explore reality, and then fails to provide evidence that can be distinguished between this is a God doing it and this is some other unknown explanation or some scientific phenomenon that we don't understand. If your God made all of us and put us down as flawed beings in a world where we can't tell the difference between what God actually does and what we think God actually does, and we can't tell the difference between I think this was God and I think this was technology, then your God is an idiot who intentionally sabotaged us to keep us from actually knowing the truth. And somehow, despite that, you think you found it. Somehow, despite being limited, you think you found God, or that God found you. And if you think God found you and it's all personal revelation stuff, cool. You now have a reason to believe that I don't have. But when we talk about the nature of evidence, why is it not the case that if you're a believer, I don't care in whatever religion, and we say, what do you believe and why do you believe it? We're doing that because if you have a good reason, we're going to believe too. And if you don't have a good reason, we're going to point out what our objection is to it. It may be the case that you have a reason that's good for you that wouldn't be good for us. And if that's the case, we're kind of stuck. But if you genuinely have a good evidence-based warrant for believing in a God, it doesn't matter whether or not Eric and I can tell you what would or should convince us. If you present it, we're either convinced or we're going to tell you why we're not convinced.
And to coattail onto that, and this goes back to our previous caller, Jay, when I was giving the examples of different gods and what might convince me of it. You can think of it this way. Every piece of evidence you give me, so when you give me a proposition that a God exists, and I say, in my mind, I say, okay, I have, say, 10% confidence that this God exists. Very, very, very low, every piece of evidence you give me can bring that confidence up a few pegs. So if you posit to me a God that answers prayers with 100% accuracy and 100% consistency, and every time you show me you making a prayer, doing a prayer, and that prayer coming true, not mundane things like, oh, I pray that Eric takes a breath of air here in the next few minutes. Like nothing mundane like that. But every time you can do something like that, you're going to bring up my confidence a few points every time that happens. Until finally, you're going to get me to a high enough point where I say, okay, I think I'm going to accept this proposition. There's still, you might get me 90, 95% if you're really, really lucky. You're probably never going to get me to 100% because there's other things in my mind that might be the actual explanation. Maybe I'm hallucinating this experience. Maybe somebody's playing a trick on me, because it's happened before, even with scientists under controlled conditions where people are playing tricks. There are other explanations that can fully explain this, and I could be completely wrong, even with my 95% confidence level. But here's the thing, though. If we undergo that test, and you say a prayer and something happens, and it brings up my confidence a little, but then the next prayer you say it, and it doesn't happen, that's going to bring my confidence right back down. So, and I think that might be the biggest difference between skeptics and people who hold on to faith. Like a few callers ago, Ray, they seem to have like this ratcheting confidence system where once something confirms their belief, it ratchets up the confidence, and that number can never come down, no matter what contradictory evidence is presented to them, no matter what prayer goes unanswered, no matter what bad thing happens in their life. No matter what, that confidence is always going to go up because they have like this ratcheting system rather than a skeptic whose confidence can go both up and down. So, yeah, if you have the evidence and you have tests for it, present it to us. And let's not squabble over YouTube titles.
And we may be getting ready to have that because Matthew's calling in from Ohio, and Matthew says he believes that what convinced him of God's existence will also convince atheists. So, Matthew, welcome. You're on the line.
Hey, Eric. Hey, Matt. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Yep, doing good.
All right. Good to hear it. I heard Eric say about after the top of the J that there are many Christian gods or many versions of the Christian God. And I know, Matt, you used to be a Christian. Would you say that's the case for you as well, that you feel like there are many Christian gods? Like coming out of Christianity, would you feel like there's so many versions, or there is one intended version of God and many people are just missing it? Or how would you look at that?
Well, I'm not convinced there is a God. And yet I know a lot of people would say, oh, I believe in the same God as the person sitting next to me. And yet I think that there are almost as many different versions of God as there are people, because I think each individual injects something different into their God concept. So they can be incredibly similar. Like most all Christians are pointing to something very similar and yet different in specifics.
No, I agree 100%. There's that my own personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I imagine it to be their own personal Jesus Christ. When I hear that, I'm a Christian 100%, super religious, but when I hear people say my personal relationship with Jesus Christ, it just kind of roll my eyes, and it's just like, you mean your own personal relationship with your own personal Jesus? Because I believe that the relationship with Jesus should be interpersonal, meaning that we should all be able to come up with the same Jesus.
I would think so too.
Interrogate it by ourselves.
Yeah, because if I've got a girlfriend and she goes to a different school and you don't know her, that's the kind of thing that we say when we don't actually have a girlfriend, but we want people to think we do. But if in fact I have a girlfriend and she goes to another school and she shows up at my house and I can introduce you to all of you to her, then all of you now know this same person, no matter what you suspected before. So you're saying, Matthew, that what convinced you of God's existence, you think will also convince atheists. And I'm less, I promise I'm not just being a dick to be a dick. I'm less concerned about whether or not it would convince atheists than whether or not it would convince a skeptic, because there are plenty of boneheadedly stupid atheists who are incredibly gullible. So, but no matter what you mean by it, I want to know what convinced you, so we can find out whether or not what convinced you should convince me and Eric.
Right, and I'm a skeptic myself, and I was a skeptic before I came to Jesus Christ. And
this should end all of it then.
Well, I would literally say I believed in.
So a skeptic is someone who doesn't believe, doesn't want to believe something until there's sufficient evidence for it. So what you're saying is you have sufficient evidence for God that you think should convince us. Awesome. I'm going to be a theist by the end of the day. Let's have it.
I hope so. When I was young, I believed in God just as much as you believe in ghosts, like in ghosts when the lights are out or whatever, right? But when I was about 18, someone told me about Jesus and the Bible. At least I knew about Jesus before 18, but I didn't read the Bible until I was about 18. And I was like, I don't care about Noah's Ark. I don't care about miracles. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to know what this Jesus guy has to say and if it's legit. And so when I started reading what he was saying, I was like, oh, these are, a lot of atheists, he has good words. But I was like, yeah, these are really good words. I understand what he's saying. I get what he's saying. And what Jesus says, and I kind of kick myself because for 10 years I've been trying to convince atheists through science and all this other stuff. But for me, what Jesus says, he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. So to me, it would be, you have to go through Jesus Christ. And that's how I came in. So for me, if I came in through Jesus Christ, why am I telling everyone else to come in through all these other means to convince them? So what I noticed is that when Jesus says, pardon?
I'm curious. Are you saying that the evidence that convinced you was when Jesus says that he's the way, the truth, and the life, or is the evidence still coming?
No, the evidence that convinced me was after. Sorry, I had some noise. After acknowledging Jesus as who he was, and entering a relationship with him that is interpersonal, not just personal, I started to see who he was, and I started to see the truth of God and the truth of the Father and all that. So my point is, what convinced me is coming through the doors. This is why I asked, are there different versions of Jesus? Because according to the Bible, Jesus says that no one comes to the Father but by him. So the only way to believe in the biblical God is to go the way the biblical God tells you to go, right? Even if you don't believe in it at first. But
how do you, when the Bible says no one comes to the Father but by him, how do you know that's true?
Mm-hmm. Right, because I took him up on the offer.
Okay. You do realize that I was a Christian from the time I walked down the aisle at the age of 5 until I was well over 30, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's why I asked in the beginning, do you see that is it possible that there are different versions? Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard the no true Scotsman fallacy, right?
Many, many times.
Many times.
I've done multiple videos on it.
Mm-hmm. Just because the no true Scotsman fallacy exists, does that mean that every time somebody calls out an imposter, they're using that they're invoking that fallacy, or they're in danger or guilty of that fallacy.
No.
Right. Right. I agree. And so,
But
to me,
that is about whether or not you can demonstrate something's not true. I'm asking you how you can demonstrate something's true. And so you're saying
right.
The evidence that convinced you is after you acknowledged Jesus, you started to see who he was. Well, I acknowledged Jesus at 5 and saw who he was and preached and taught who he was and lived that life for decades, and then found I didn't have any good reason to believe it. I failed to see what your good reason is. And if you're going to say you have to try it in order to get the evidence, first of all, that's an incredibly dubious sales tactic. Like, hey, I've got a really great investment strategy, but you've got to start by investing your money. But also, considering I tried it, what I guess Eric's probably going to have questions about the skeptical aspect of this, because genuinely, and I'm not going to no true Scotsman you on the no true skeptic, but what you've described does not fit as with skepticism on how I would evaluate whether or not a claim is true. Because if the thing is, start living your life as a Christian, start reading and studying the Bible to find out what Jesus said. Number one, I have no evidence that any of the things that are in the Bible that are attributed to Jesus are actually said by Jesus. And I have no evidence that even if Jesus said them, that they are in fact true. And I have problems with what Jesus said. And I'm doing an entire series of videos on just the red letter edition of the Bible, going through the things that are attributed to Jesus to show where they don't make sense. Why would Jesus curse a fig tree for not giving fruit when it wasn't in season? Why does that make sense?
To me, that makes sense to me, because he is God, and if he tells it to do what he wants it to do and it doesn't do what he wants it to do, then he's showing an example of that. He says he tells his people to bear fruit.
Matthew, are you suggesting that if God told a fig tree to bear fruit, the fig tree could refuse?
I don't necessarily say that it can refuse. I think that was a teaching moment. I think what he was basically saying was using it as an example for us, who he tells us to bear fruit, and if we do not bear fruit, then we basically be cast away.
So
why couldn't Jesus just say as such rather than using a convoluted, confusing little act?
And I agree. Yeah, no. And this is one of the things I see with atheists. They'll say things like God does weird things, or they don't like things that God do. That doesn't mean he doesn't exist, or doesn't mean he didn't speak these things. And for me, I think that's weird.
No. We're not going down this route of what you think you've heard atheists say. Or what arguments atheists might do. It's not up to us to demonstrate that a God doesn't exist. It's up to you to demonstrate that a God does exist. I don't need an example of things. I don't need an example of things that are irrelevant. I need you to actually answer the question. So if Jesus is walking along, and let's just read it.
Yeah.
So Matthew 21, starting at verse 18. Now in the morning, as he returned into the city, he hungered. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing thereon but leaves. And he said unto it, Let no fruit grow on thee henceforward forever. And presently the fig tree withered away. And you're trying to say that Jesus was trying to make some statement about us and whether we bear fruit or not. But the actual text says he was hungry. He saw a fig tree and it didn't have fruit on it, so he cursed it. At no point does it say he commanded it to grow fruit and the tree refused. So that, I don't know where you got that. But if it's not fig season and the fig tree doesn't have fruit on it, then only an idiot would expect there to be figs on a fig tree that's out of season, right?
I can see
would
that.
Would an all-knowing God possibly expect a fig tree to have figs on it when it's not fig season?
That would be like me going into the supermarket to buy strawberries when they're clearly not in season, and then I burn down the supermarket because they don't have strawberries.
I don't know. I wouldn't give the same analogy, but I understand how it sounds strange, right? And I'm not here to justify or try to, oh well, but it was this and that. It sounds
So
to me, it sounds strange, but good.
So Matthew, what we're getting at here is how are you confident that this is actually an accurate representation of something that happened, that Jesus actually lived, and that this writing here accurately
Mm-hmm.
reflects what he did and said? Because let me put it this
Right.
way:
Yep.
I'll give you two choices here. Which is more plausible?
Mm.
That this is an accurate telling of God's Son or God Himself on Earth having a beef with a fig tree as a teaching moment,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
or somebody wrote this in an effort to promote their religion? What's more plausible?
To me, the first one, because someone wrote this having to present their religion or whatever it is. I wouldn't know what person
So-
or what.
So, okay, so you said that the first would be the more plausible. So now let's examine a different holy book. Let's look at the Quran. The Quran says that Muhammad ascended to heaven on a winged beast. What's more plausible? That actually happened, or somebody wrote that in an effort to promote their religion?
I would say that the second with Muhammad.
Okay, what's the difference here?
Mhm.
Because from my point of view, they're the
difference-
same.
yes.
Two different holy books
I understand.
making spectacular claims. So, okay, you understand. So tell us,
Yeah. So
what do you have on the Bible side that trumps the Quran?
right. So with the Quran, from what I believe, that the hadith there's a hadith that says that Muhammad had this experience and wrote the Quran. Muhammad having this experience and wrote the Quran is not in the actual Quran. It's the hadith that says that Muhammad had done this, and then there's a whole bunch of different hadiths, and no one knows which one is the right hadith. So for me, with the hadith and just Islam coming, Islam kind of reminds me of Mormonism, the same idea where it's just like the Bible didn't answer certain things, so let us answer it. So for example, the fig tree situation, maybe that sounds strange, and maybe there's some type of understanding that was missing or something. A book like that would bring it out and say, oh, this happened, and that's why the fig tree didn't bear fruit. And then you look back.
So
and then
hold on,
you do some examination.
You're putting out a lot here. So you're saying that the Quran is missing
Yeah.
certain things that you would require in order to believe it. You're saying the Bible has
right.
those things, but even if that was true, I accept your explanation that the Quran is perhaps incomplete or there's things in it you don't like. But how does that at all add credence or weight to the Bible? Couldn't they both be wrong? Couldn't they both be the case that just somebody's writing this to promote their religion?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And also,
So for
your dismissal of the Quran as just an update on the Bible seems problematic, since the New Testament is just an update on the Old Testament. So couldn't a Jew be as dismissive of Christianity because of a fig tree problem as you are of the Quran?
Yeah, I can see that being the case.
Yeah.
Sure.
Islam
So
is derivative.
How do we as skeptics, we have Judaism, we have Christianity, and we have Islam. How do we as skeptics determine which of those is correct, if any of them are correct?
Yeah, I would say examine it, right? I would examine the Quran.
That's not Matthew. That's genuinely, that's not only not an answer, that is the least skeptical answer anybody could present. Examine it is a cop-out. I have examined all of them. I'm asking, what criteria can we use to determine which of the three, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, is right, or if any of them are right? You can't just go with examine it. What's the criteria? What's the methodology?
I would have to go then with what convinced me from the beginning of this talk, what I came here for, right?
And what convinced you is to try it, and then you saw things that you liked. How is that a demonstration of truth?
Right. And I didn't see things that I liked. I saw things that I didn't like, especially about myself, right? It wasn't just like, oh, I like this.
There's
This makes me
nothing
feel a
about
certain way.
you in the Bible. There's nothing about you in the Bible. You didn't see anything about yourself. That is you injecting meaning and seeing things that aren't in the Bible. I guarantee you, Matthew, despite the fact there's a book in there that has our name on it, you and I are not in the Bible. So what's the criteria to show that it's true?
Would you say that the Bible, at least, even if it's just a made-up holy book, there are certain ideas in it that tell us about human behavior?
Yes, just like every other holy book.
Right. So that's what I mean by I saw things about me. I'm not just like delusional.
I'm asking how, but see, Matthew, if you examine it and you examine all of the holy books that men have ever written, is the one that appeals to you personally the one that's true?
No.
Okay. Then how do you tell which one of them is actually true? If it's not about your personal preferences, what is the criteria, the objective criteria that you and me and Eric can use to tell which one is true?
So I can only go by what the Bible says, right? And
no. You can't only go by what the Bible says. The Bible is not true just because. I'm asking, what is the criteria?
No, I'm not saying that.
What is the criteria that determines truth?
Right. So please let me explain, and I'll try to be brief. So when the Bible says this is how you come to know the biblical God, I'm going to have to come to know the biblical God by how the Bible tells me to come to know the biblical God.
That is literally a circular argument, Matthew. That is literally you saying the only way to do it is to do what the Bible says. That's a load of bullshit that no fucking decent skeptic could possibly utter. What is the measure of truth? Not what does the Bible say? It's how do you know that the Bible is true? Because it's not true. You would agree with me that it's not true in a number of things, right? Bats aren't birds. The order of events, the order of events in Genesis for the creation does not match what science has discovered about this. You would agree with me probably that it's wrong to actually enslave people and own them as slaves and beat them as long as they don't die within a couple days. All of those things I would hope we would agree on, right?
Yeah, I would say beating your slave and all this stuff. I don't like that stuff.
But, well, I don't care if you like it. It's in the Bible,
whether
right?
It's true, whether it's true or not, that's not a concern.
It's in the
Bible. I don't like something, whether it's true.
in the Bible, right? It's in the Bible, right?
It's in the Bible, but
so there's something in the Bible. So there's something in the Bible that you don't like. How do you know that it's wrong?
Whether it's wrong or right, morality is subjective, right? So whether it's wrong or right doesn't depend on me.
No.
Okay.
What is the foundation of your view on morality then?
I don't really have morality. I'm just obedient to God.
Okay. I don't know what criteria you've used to call yourself a skeptic, but I wish I had the power to revoke it right now. That last statement of you saying that you don't have a moral criteria, you're just obedient to God. What does God want, and how do you know what God wants? Because if God's okay with slavery and you're not, then you're not obedient to God, are you?
Well, I'm sure you know, because you said you were a Christian, and I'm not challenging on this. I'm sure you do know that at least a Christian can say, "Oh no, I follow the Old Testament, the New Testament, not the Old Testament."
No. What's in the Old Testament? Original sin and every prophecy, everything that potentially leads up to the New Testament. You don't get to just dismiss the Old Testament.
I believe in the Old Testament. I just don't follow the rules of the Old Testament.
So you believe that slavery is okay? So you believe that slavery is okay?
I believe that slavery happened and God sanctioned it. Whether I think it's okay,
that's you believe
between me and God.
You believe that God said it's okay to own people as property.
I believe that.
Okay. Why is God good?
it really depends on what someone means by good.
Okay. Well, you have a really strange version of Christianity. Your version of Christianity is as strange as your version of skepticism. So you worship a God that you don't think is good.
I worship a God that I don't agree with 100% of the time, all the time. But I trust that, just like a child may not agree with their parent, but they trust that their parent knows what they're doing, even if they seem like they don't know what they're doing.
So you're going to trust that God's right about slavery.
I'm trusting that he knew what he was doing in that time, and I'm not one to go and try to question it and be like, well, you did this. Like, for me, if I believe in God, remember, I'm coming as somebody who believes in God, right? And if I was to draw a circle, and in that circle I was to shade in how much knowledge I know, I wouldn't even shade. I would just put a little dot. So I know there are things that I don't know about God. And have you ever experienced something that...
What do you know? Do you know about God? Name one thing that you know about God that you can demonstrate. One thing.
That he wants me to keep his commandments.
How do you know that?
Because he says so.
How do you know that?
Because I kept his commandments and I see the results thereof.
You don't know. No God has ever said anything to anyone, as far as I can tell. How do you know what God wants?
Because I kept his commandments, and when I keep his commandments, I see the results.
Where did you get the I keep his commandments
too? But what difference does it make whether or not you keep his commandments as to what God wants? If God wants something, he has to communicate that to you. How do you get information about what God wants?
Through the Bible.
How do you know that the Bible tells you what God wants?
Because going back to the beginning of this, I took Jesus up on his offer. I entered to the door of Jesus Christ. He says, I am the door, right? So I kept his commandments. To keep my commandments, he will manifest himself onto me. So now that I kept his commandments, he manifests himself onto me, shows me that he is God and that he is true.
No, sir, that's not how anything related to truth or skepticism is determined. You have a wholly circular argument that doesn't demonstrate the truth of anything to anyone. Everything that you've said comes down to, this is what I believe.
Well, would you say that the biblical God says, being that Jesus is the biblical God, says that the way to know the Father is through him?
I don't know
whether you believe it or not.
Hang on. Does the Bible suggest that? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean. And I'm not trying to say, oh, you don't believe it. So
I'm asking, this is the thing that you keep missing, Matthew. I'm asking, how do you know that what the Bible says is true, especially when we already know there are things in the Bible that aren't true, and there are things in the Bible that most of us find morally repugnant, which would be absurd from a good God. But you've just thrown a good God out of the window. You're just going to blindly follow whatever you think the God of the Bible wants. I wish prayer worked, because I would pray for you to have your brain and humanity restored, because what you are advocating for right now is blind slavery obedience to a concept that you don't have any reason to think is real and that you don't even think is good. How fucking embarrassing is that?
Well,
so Matthew, now that we've
real,
Matthew, now that we've come full circle all the way back around to I've read things in the Bible and I took it to heart, and that's why I believe. We talked about how you got there, and what we're trying to ask you is how do you justify this and how you distinguish this from other forms of faith? For instance, we can have a Muslim who says the same thing about the Quran and the Hadiths. I've read stuff in there, I took it to heart, I put it to practice, and I now feel this personal relationship with Allah. So the same claims you're giving us, except about a completely different holy book with contradictory claims.
If I may, it's not about feeling. That's the difference. It's that I was tracking for a moment, but you said because I feel. It's not really about my feelings. Sometimes I feel bad. Sometimes I feel good about things I have to do that God told me. So it's not just about.
But you feel it's true, though. You feel it's true, though, right? You feel that it's true. You think that it's true.
I would say I know it's true.
You think it's true.
I can be
Well, I
challenged.
understand you claim.
Yeah.
So Matthew, I
Right.
understand you claim to knowledge. Let me frame it differently, okay? Let's say that I, as an atheist, I pick up the Bible, I read it, and I ponder it, and I pick up the Quran and I read it and I ponder it, and I say, using Matthew's criteria, his process, I choose the Quran and I'll believe in Allah. Let's say that I just did that. What did I do wrong?
I don't think at this point I don't think you did anything wrong.
But I chose something contradictory to your position, right?
No,
because obviously you think your religion. Do you think that your religious? Do you think that your religion is correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that the Muslims have it wrong?
Yes.
Okay. I used your process with both holy books, and I chose Islam.
Yes.
What did I do wrong? I chose the wrong answer according to you. What did I do wrong?
No, I don't think you did anything wrong at the moment. I think that's right. Like if you feel like that is the truth, you go in there and you give it a shot.
Hold on, Matthew. Hold on. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you, but we're really getting to the point here. We're really getting to the point here. Your methodology is flawed. If your methodology can be used to come to the correct answer and the wrong answer simultaneously, then it's a flawed methodology. We don't need to use it. And you shouldn't be using it either.
That's not my methodology. I would say that's more of a bit of a straw manning of my methodology, and not to be rude, with all due respect. I think
we just went the full circle. I'm sorry, Matthew. Maybe we did misunderstand what you just said. So tell us succinctly, one or two sentences. What's your methodology?
Right. So my methodology is trusting in the words of Jesus and what he said.
I trusted in Allah and the words that he said, and I did it.
Okay. And then did it produce any results as you're going up through your life? Does it produce any results?
Sure. I walk around feeling a little bit better. I walk around, I feel better. I see the results of it. I now have a Muslim community that I can gel with and have social interactions with. Yeah, my life improved when I became a Muslim.
Okay.
Is there anything else you can give us?
Hypothetical. No, for me, this is hypothetical. I've seen Muslims. I spoke to Muslims. I speak to a lot of Muslims, or I spoke to a lot of Muslims. And to me, I see a lot of dishonesty. I see a lot of craftiness.
I've spoken with Christians.
Matthew, you might be the king of dishonesty.
I've spoken with Christians. Pardon? I've seen Christians live miserable lives. I've seen Christians totally not living to their full potential. I mean, your criticisms of Islam and their followers can be levied right back at Christianity.
Oh yeah, I would say there's a lot. There's just like we talked about in the beginning. I think there's a lot of people that claim to have this personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I don't believe that's true Christianity. And I know the no true Scotsman fallacy can be invoked, but
I'm not invoking the no true Scotsman. I'm going to ask you, how do you know that's not you're describing? How do you know you're not fooling yourself?
Because every day, someone asked, or I had a question asked to me, how do I know God is real? And I constantly experience God being real every day. I believe God is truth and reality, and I experience that truth and reality. And
how do you know you're not fooling yourself?
You don't even know what truth is. How can you believe God is truth?
Well, truth is the reality.
You just redefined God to be truth, and you've already demonstrated you have no path to truth.
Well, Jesus says he is the truth. He says, I'm the way, the truth,
I don't give
and
a
the life.
What Jesus said. Tell me what Jesus said one more time. When you can't prove Jesus existed, you can't prove Jesus said anything, and you can't prove that Jesus saying he is the truth means that he is the truth. You don't get to do any of that.
I mean,
but Matthew, by your own admission, Muslims misinterpret their feelings and come to a wrong conclusion. You said that Christians also do the same thing. Christians also you have bad Christians. They follow this process. They come to wrong conclusions. My question again is, how do you know this is not happening to you?
Because for me, I don't go by feelings.
Oh, bullshit. Shit. If you listen back to this call, it's nothing but feelings.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
Matthew, for one moment, just for 20 seconds, just entertain the idea that you're wrong about your process and you're wrong about your conclusion.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
How would you know? How could you test that? How would you know? How would you falsify this?
How would I falsify it?
Yeah.
It would have to be that the wisdom that God has given me was something that I made up, and it just luckily so happened to be applicable to my life, and luckily so happened to work well with my family and my marriage and stuff like that.
Listen to
so
you.
I
You
can
can't
give
even
you
answer
so
this
Matthew,
question honestly.
I'll just as flawed as it is, I'll take it. He'll have to be convinced that what he read and what he believes improved his life by coincidence. And if I'm if I'm framing that incorrectly, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
I tell you right now.
That
All right, let's just remove coincidence, and let's just come to the conclusion that the Bible was written by humans with human problems and human outlooks, and you as a human down the road read something written by humans about human problems and human outlooks, and some of that resonated with you. Because I'll fully admit there are some scriptures in the Bible that are super apt. Like there's some stuff in the Proverbs and in the Psalms that are amazing, but that's not evidence that a God wrote this. That's evidence that somebody who was insightful wrote these things. Like there's a scripture there's a scripture in Proverbs that expectation postponed makes the heart sick, but the thing that comes when desired fills you with life. Like beautiful poetry, but it's a reflection of the human condition. We've all anticipated something and longed and been sick over wanting to get it, and then once you get it, you feel great. That's what the proverb writer wrote. So hold on, Matthew. Let me cap it off, Matthew. I'll cap it off and let you talk. My point is, the Bible was written by humans, so it's going to resonate with other humans. You're a human, so the Bible resonates with you. That's not evidence that God exists. That's just evidence that you read something another human wrote, and it happened to apply to certain aspects of your life. But also, by your own admission, there are things written in the Bible that don't resonate with you, such as slavery. Probably also, I'll go out on a limb here, drowning everybody on earth, human sacrifice, destroying cities with fire and sulfur. I'm pretty sure none of those things resonate with you. Why, as a skeptic, are you dismissing those things and only latching on to the things you like?
Well, when I don't dismiss them. If I don't like them, doesn't mean they didn't happen, right? Just because I don't, and I'm sure you would agree with that, right? Just because I don't like them doesn't mean it didn't happen.
I'm not saying you didn't. I'm not saying you deny they happen. I'm just going to accept. I'm just going to think that wholesale you accept what the Bible says is true, and those things actually happened. But you obviously disagree with them. These things do not resonate with you. Slavery, owning people as property, does not resonate with you by your own words. So why are you just discarding and ignoring those things, and then accepting the things that you like, cherry picking, and then still call yourself a skeptic?
No. I don't discard them, or I don't like. Oh, I don't like it, so it doesn't exist. To me, they happen.
That's not what I'm saying.
How it said it happened. Okay.
You can't honestly listen to and honestly address what Eric said. You are backed so far into a corner now. You are a cartoon.
Yeah. So basically, Matthew, in a nutshell, you're saying that you read things in the Bible, you put it to work, and you felt and you experienced improvements in your life, or however you want to frame it. Something changed in a positive way that convinced you. And I'm telling you, I'll recap the entire conversation. We have Muslims doing the same exact thing, yet coming to contradictory conclusions that you hold. You, by your own admission, say Christians do the same thing, but they also believe in the wrong things. And then you say that you rely on the Bible and scriptures in order to use to feed this into your methodology, and that's how you come to your conclusions. But then we just went over how there are things in the Bible you just simply don't add to that process because they're either uncomfortable, or you don't like them, or you have moral conflict with them. Not that you deny they happen, but that you just simply don't like them. I don't see this as a consistent methodology at all, mainly because you're selectively inputting the evidence, cherry picking, and you're also ignoring the fact that this process can give you a bad conclusion, as I stated earlier. So Matthew, at this point, there's not. I don't see how you can recover with this line of argumentation at this point, because this is not going to convince me. Go ahead.
So you mentioned the Proverbs and reading and human problems and stuff. So the thing that I see with the Muslims that convince me that they are incorrect is when I see their behavior. And that's what I mean. I don't just mean like it resonates with me and my life got better. The way that I am as a human being has changed. And so when I see the word, and this is something that I'm doing a little bit different when I talk to atheists, and I want to do it moving forward. I don't want to do it any other way, talking to atheists about God's existence. When I see the Bible defining, if I'm a biblical believer, and I see the Bible defining what it means in order to know God the Father, right? And the only way to get people to know that God the Father is through Jesus, I'm going to have to accept the idea that even if I don't like it, I want atheists to believe in science and come that way and all this stuff. Even if I don't like it, this goes back to the whole resonating and cherry picking, which I don't think I'm doing, because there are things in the Bible I do not like, but this doesn't mean it didn't happen. Even though I don't like it, I have to say, look, this is how you come to know the biblical God.
Why do the things in the Bible that you don't like not lower your confidence that the Bible's true? Why are you in this ratcheting faith mode where things can only go push it up?
It would be foolish to think, it would be foolish that something that I don't like makes something not true. There are a lot of things that happen in our life. I don't like gravity. I don't like that children fall down because of gravity. I wish they can float and not die when they fall off bridges or whatever.
Oh my
right?
God.
But doesn't mean gravity doesn't exist. It doesn't lower my confidence in gravity.
Matthew, your whole appeal to the Bible was you read things in the Bible that are not objective. I mean, I guess they can be considered objective claims, like, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and other things. But the Bible also makes these other claims, and you're only feeding the claims that you agree with into this methodology. You're not allowing claims that you don't like, claims that go against certain things, like, for instance, omnibenevolent, omnipotent, the omni-God. That allows slavery.
We're not giving an omni-benevolent God in the Bible.
Is your God all loving?
He's not even convinced God is good.
Of love?
He doesn't even believe in a good God, let alone an omnibenevolent God. He doesn't know anything about morality. He is not advocating for the character of God at all. Just that he exists, and if you follow him, he does things that you can interpret it as beneficial to you. I mean, Matthew has tossed out everything about Christianity in any orthodox sense, that God is good, that God is the arbiter or the origin. He tossed all that out because he, as a skeptic, can crap on Muslims and pick and choose from what the Bible, what he wants to ignore or not. Not that he says it's not true. So when you have a book that's written by a God that might be good, might not be good, it doesn't matter if it's wrong about stuff. It doesn't matter if it advocates for slavery. Matthew has invented a useless God in his mind.
So, Eric, you mentioned something about me not liking things in a methodology. I don't like the methodology that the only way to know God is through Jesus, because, obviously it gets me in situations like this where people are like, well, I don't care what Jesus has to say, and I don't want to come to God, whatever. So I don't like it. Well, and that's what I'm trying to explain. Like, it's nothing that I like.
So it provides you. Stop. What it does, Matthew, is it provides you with excuses. It gives you the illusion of thinking that you believe something is true with no responsibility or requirement to demonstrate it to anybody. You just get to say, oh, those people don't, I don't like that methodology. It doesn't matter. I mean, God can come up with a stupid methodology and we can complain about it all we want, but it's God's methodology. And if you want to be right with God, then you'll do the stupid methodology. Well, I'm sorry, but it's stupid. The methodology that leads you to God is irrational, based on fallacious reasoning, is not a reliable path to truth. Why on earth could you advocate telling other people to throw out logic and reason, to throw out fallacies, and just go ahead and go with something because the Bible says so?
Right.
Matthew,
I would say yes.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll interject afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say I demonstrate it through behavior. That's the demonstration for me, and not only for me. Remember, I said in the beginning that it's an interpersonal relationship with God, right? So it's not just
Matthew,
me; it's with other people as well. Yes.
Matthew, the question that I just asked, your behavior is completely fucking irrelevant to the question that I just asked about sound epistemology. why would you mention your behavior if your behavior is irrelevant to whether or not an epistemology is good?
Well, my thing is, I mentioned behavior because it's relevant to the whole thing, how I see it.
No, it's not. Just like before, when another caller suggested we were too critical, and that's why he couldn't give one example, you are now suggesting when I say, how can you advocate for an epistemology that throws out logic, that dismisses and relies upon logical fallacies? How can you do that? And your answer was, I show by my behavior. Your behavior is completely, 100%, completely irrelevant to whether or not your epistemology is sound, correct?
I would disagree with that.
Then you're fucking wrong then you are fucking wrong in the most obvious and ridiculous sense. There is nothing about any epistemology, the method by which we determine truth. There is nothing about any method by which we determine truth that is contingent on Matthew's fucking behavior. And it is beyond absurd for you to suggest that there is.
Well, the reason why I would suggest this is because, as Jesus says, he says, let your light so shine.
I don't give a fuck what Jesus said. You can't prove that Jesus ever said anything, Matthew. Are you ever going to acknowledge a fucking legitimate question that I asked? Or are you going to... How is your behavior remotely relevant to how someone determines truth? Last chance.
You unmute me and then it says how someone, and then I hear a beep. So I'm not sure if
how is your behavior relevant to any method of determining truth?
Okay. So for me, I would say that because of I have to go with...
I'm going to mute you. We're going to start again because it seems that we have a misunderstanding. The words "for me" are irrelevant. An epistemology is either sound or unsound. And I'm asking you how your behavior is relevant to how an epistemology is sound or unsound. Do you understand the question?
So when other people see my behavior, they realize that there's something different about it that was what the Bible would be considered divine. And so that divine behavior...
No, Matthew. When people see your behavior, they want to fucking punch a wall because you are boneheadedly dismissing rationality. Your behavior is irrelevant to whether or not an epistemological model is sound. And here's the proof of that. If there is a sound epistemology right now, Matthew, if there's a sound method to determine the truth and you die, does that sound method become unsound?
No, it does not.
No, it does not, which means your fucking behavior has nothing to do with whether or not that model is sound, correct?
Well, it's not. My behavior
is
based on God. So
correct.
Can you ask that again?
If you die, your behavior had no bearing on whether or not that model was sound, which means your bearing while your behavior while you're alive has no bearing on whether or not that model is sound, right?
If I die,
oh my fucking God, Matthew. Listen very carefully. Do not wait for your turn to speak. Listen very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
An epistemological model, a means by which we can determine truth. If it is sound and useful and produces truth, does that change if Matthew dies?
No.
Does it change if Eric dies?
No.
Then how can how Matthew lives be relevant to changing it? Does it change when your behavior changes?
No, because my behavior is
No,
not based
which
on
means your
me.
behavior isn't relevant to the method, correct?
So the method is
Jesus fucking Christ. This is so fucking
Matthew.
embarrassing, Matthew. I
let's-
just
let's-
hand walked you right up to the fucking water, stuck your head in, and said drink, and you're like, no, I won't do that.
Matthew,
let
can
me
somebody
explain the
improve their
methodology.
behavior? Matthew,
No,
Matthew,
you
can
don't get
somebody
to
improve their
explain
behavior?
methodology. You don't even know what one is. I'm going to shut up and let Eric go.
Matthew, can somebody improve their behavior based on a lie or a series of lies?
Yes.
Okay. So somebody's behavior and what comes after has no bearing on the truth of what actually compelled them to do these things, right? So your behavior...
Only if this is
You're
where
changing
the
your answer?
caveat. I agree. Yeah, I agree, but
Okay,
I would
go
like to
ahead.
make a caveat if I can.
Sure.
Only if the methodology says that the behavior of what God can do, or the evidence of what God can do is in your behavior. So the reason why I say my behavior is because my behavior is what we would call rotten God. It's shown
Matthew.
that God has changed my behavior. Yeah.
You made Matt abandon ship. Matthew, can this apply to Muslims as well? Can a Muslim say, God's watching you, God wants you to behave, everything else, including those statements, be a lie? I'm sorry, let's go rewind. Allah is watching you, Allah wants you to behave, all those things be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
It compels somebody to better behave, and it still be false. Yes or no?
Yes.
Like okay. So the reasons you're giving us, you're trying to paint them as they only apply in Christianity. Your special pleading.
No.
In fact, your methodology in itself, saying that I read the Bible and I do what Jesus says, and that's how I know Jesus exists, itself is circular. Your methodology is excluding automatically anything except Christianity.
Would you agree that is not my methodology, but the methodology of the Bible that the Bible presents?
No, I think this is your thing.
Okay.
You may have read scriptures that seem to support your methodology, but I think this methodology is for the most part your invention.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but when the Bible says that no man, not that Jesus is saying this, but the Bible says no one knows the Father but by me. No one can come to the Father but by me. Wouldn't that sound like that's the methodology that you come to know God according to the Bible?
I have no idea. Maybe there's a God who doesn't care if you get to know him or not. Maybe there's a God that only reveals himself to people who don't believe.
The Bible. I just meant according to the Bible, not like any other gods. Just
what difference does it make what the Bible fucking says? You don't get to just assume that the Bible is true. You have to prove it.
That's fair.
I'll accept that the Bible.
What I'm saying right now.
Let's roll with it, Matthew. Let's roll with that. Let's just say, okay, that's the methodology the Bible puts forward. How is that methodology not unsound? Like how can you tell if that's a sound methodology? Because automatically it's excluding other religions. It's just simply saying God, which is the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's assume that it's not sound. I just want to clarify that this is not my own personal methodology. Would that be correct?
All right, I'm talking about a methodology for truth, not a methodology for Christianity.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't present a methodology for discerning truth. And if it did, it wouldn't be contingent on Matthew's fucking behavior, because Matthew isn't in the fucking Bible.
So, hey, Matthew, let's try. Matthew, hold on. Let's try this from a slightly different angle. I got this off of Pierce Watkins. He gave me this. He used this strategy a couple weeks ago, and I liked it a lot. Let's pretend an alien lands tomorrow. Alien lands here on Earth tomorrow. His name is Alan the Alien. He has about the same intelligence as us. He has about the same knowledge of the universe as us. And you want to convince him to worship the God of the Bible. And you're using this methodology. What objections do you think he would come up with?
The only objection I can think of is if he doesn't want to try it.
Maybe he would say, "Why should I trust this book, the Bible, that you're presenting me? Why should I trust this book?" Let's start there.
Well, for me, I would say you should trust it because I looked into it and I experienced it. Just as an example, I've experienced it, so I would suggest that you give it a shot because I believe it's true. Now I know God.
Alan the alien says, "Okay, I'll try that." He reads the Bible and he comes back and he says, "Yeah, I don't feel anything. I see issues with this book."
Because that wouldn't be the methodology. The methodology would be keeping Christ's commandments.
So again, you're back to a circular methodology. You're saying you're baking in the requirement of Christ in the methodology. That's the unsound part. That's the circular reasoning part.
This calls almost an hour of my life that I'm not going to fucking get back.
So Matthew, just right there, you're not Matthew. Right there, you're not being skeptical because your methodology has you're begging the question with your methodology. You're not being skeptical with this. This is unsound. This is, and we already went over this 30 minutes ago because you can come to the wrong conclusions with this methodology.
I wouldn't say I'm being skeptical with this because I've already experienced it, right? I already know it to be true. So what I'm saying, what I just want to clarify again, just to solidify that this is not in my head came up methodology.
Oh my God,
this is the methodology that the Bible gives.
Shut the fuck up. What is your proposed methodology for truth? Answer that now or I'm done. What is your proposed methodology for determining if a statement is true?
Yeah. Say it like you're saying it to Alan the alien.
Like I would say experiencing it. Hearing it and seeing it for to be true myself.
No. Your statement is now wholly rejected. People's experiences are prone to interpretation, and people interpret their experiences wrong all the time. People can't even remember what words someone uttered. I'm still talking. What words someone uttered just a few seconds ago. I've had to ask you the same question multiple times because you can't keep the question focused in your brain to give an example. Your experience is not the measure of truth.
Well, I don't mean like your personal experience.
I don't care what you mean, Matthew. I'm done with you. I don't care what you mean. You felt it was so important to say this wasn't your methodology while making me argue for 5 or 10 minutes to demonstrate that your personal fucking behavior is irrelevant to methodologies to determine truth. Anybody that makes me fight that hard to establish the most fucking obvious thing that I hand walked them up to is no longer deserving of my time. Congratulations on making Jesus look like a fucking buffoon.
So
goodbye. I can't. An hour. There is no chill left after an hour. If all I have to do is say, if you don't know, how dare you call in? I'm a skeptic and I think that my reason would convince any atheist. I don't think that the reason Matthew gave even makes sense, let alone should convince anybody. But his compelling reason for Alan the alien, or was it Alan?
Mm-hmm. Alan the alien.
Alan the alien is, you should try it because I tried it and it worked great for me. Well, hell, I've heard that about heroin. I've heard that about Islam. I've heard that about anything and everything. That is not the path to, but there's all these other people and they tried it too and they seem to be enjoying life. Yes. Neither Eric nor myself have any illusions about whether or not believers believe and whether or not they credit their belief with lots of positive effects. The issue is can you demonstrate it? Like when the guy called in earlier to say that God healed his dog, how do you demonstrate that? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a methodology for truth. And when you're just like, oh, you experience it. No. Yes, it's true before anybody writes in that everything is something we process through our sense experience. And so it will all be through sensing it. But we all know when I'm saying that, I'm not talking about, is your sense data actually reliable? It's about, are you able to take that sense data and reach an accurate model of the world from it? That's the issue here. And your experience is not the accurate model of the world. Your experiences lie to you all the time. Optical illusions, auditory illusions. I've seen some that are just amazing optical illusions. Stuff's moving when it's not, when there's absolutely nothing moving, things change in colors.
Mm-hmm.
not being able to see things, and it's all exposing actual, in some cases, physical problems with our eyes, where there's essentially a dead spot where the optic nerve comes in, to physical limitations of rods and cones, all the way up to how our brain manufactures reality. Every single one of you out there, your brain is inventing a model of reality all the time. You aren't, when you look out and you have this big field of vision, you aren't looking at that entire field of vision the entire time. Your eyeballs will scan around, but also your brain is picking out different things, which is why you can get attention and inattention blindness. The very idea.
Right now, there are 3,000 people watching this stream, and each one of them is forming memories of these conversations that we're having, and even us talking right now. And at the end of the stream, there's going to be 3,000 different versions of what just occurred. There'll be commonalities and some major differences. You'll have people that are in direct contradiction with each other about, no, Eric said this. No, Matt actually said that. No, actually, Matthew on the call actually said that. Like, this type of sensory evidence, there's a reason why we don't rely on it very much in courts. There's a reason why we rely on objective, demonstrable, repeatable evidence in things like science and in court proceedings over a sensory experience, eyewitness testimony, because we understand the problems with this. And Matthew calling in and saying, well, you just have to, first of all, you have to start with the premise that Jesus is wanting you. It exists and he wants you to come and get to know him, because then that's the methodology of you seek Jesus and you'll find Jesus. Exactly. Not understanding that's the jump that we can't make there, Matthew. That's the jump that we were trying to get you to acknowledge, that you are taking a leap with Alan the Alien. He's there. He's a blank slate. He's never heard of Jesus. He's never heard of Muhammad or Allah or anything like that. And you're just telling him, read this book, accept that a guy named Jesus or a God named Jesus exists, and this book accounts his stuff on earth, and just accept. Like that's your methodology. And there's a reason why we don't do that, because we have all kinds of reasons to doubt the text, to doubt the personal experiences of you, and even of myself. I was a Christian at one point. I've had experiences. I got good reasons to doubt those things. I have good reasons to doubt all the Christian experiences. I have good reasons to doubt all of Muslim experiences. These are things that you have to overcome with your methodology, account for, and eliminate out of that methodology in order for us to take it seriously. Because until you do, we're not going to do that.
We got a couple calls left, including one that's been on hold for that entire thing. Isaiah Arkansas, I think. Pronouns are he, him. Isaiah, did you fall asleep in the hour and 25 minutes I've kept you on hold? That may be the case. I'm gonna return Isaiah to the queue. And Chris, pronouns are they, them, calling from New York about religious schools. Chris, you're on with Eric and Matt.
Hello. So it's so weird to actually be talking to you right now. So my question is just, should religious schools exist? Why or why not? I feel like I already know the answer to this, that we're probably all going to agree on, but it's just kind of something that has interested me for a while, because I don't know, I guess I just kind of think about it sometimes, and I was interested on what
I don't know what you mean by should.
you guys would think about it.
I'm fine with religious schools. I'm fine with religious schools existing as an exercise of religious freedom.
Yeah. I guess my thoughts were kind of if they give good, unbiased education, then I don't really see the point of them calling themselves religious. You know what I mean? Like, if it's like the same as a secular education, but like, if they just like pray before every class or something like that, or like, I don't know, like if they have Bible studies or something.
Chris, did you ever go to a religious school at all?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, so the religious school you went to, how can you not know what they do at a religious school if you went to a religious school? Well, I don't believe you.
I mean,
goodbye. I genuinely don't believe them at all. So religious schools, private schools, both in the sense of in any university is in a potentially private university. I don't care whether they're religious or not. Religious schools for like, kids. We already know what goes on there. And it's a mix of teaching good things and teaching religious instruction. All of them do that. They exist primarily to make sure that they put their religion's spin on any problematic education things. And it's also about making sure that the environment that kids are being schooled in is consistent with the values and beliefs of those people, independent of that. Like, some Catholic schools are amazing at, teaching evolution and other things like that. And even though the Mormon Church has its issue with evolution and science and reality on a couple of occasions, I know some, Mormon zoologists and stuff. From a religious freedom standpoint, I think religious schools should exist. It provides education and religious instruction, and they're private. They shouldn't be government subsidized at all. But as an exercise of religious freedom, I think they should exist. As an ideal, I think they should not exist, because I think the world should not have any religion that can't demonstrate its own that is true.
Yeah, because the concept of just as long as the school is meeting minimum requirements for education, then I can't really argue for them to go away. I can say I prefer them not to exist. I prefer to see private schools that are, people put children into private schools or religious schools because they're expecting like a higher level of education than they can generally get from public schools, at least here in the United States. But it's like you can't legislate those out of existence. I could say I prefer them not to be there, but I can't say that I would move or act in some way to eliminate them. As long as they're meeting minimum standards of education and is actually preparing these kids to get out into the world with the proper knowledge and tool sets that they need in order to become, functional members of society, it's fine. Because ultimately, these are parents that are religiously minded, grouping their kids together and teaching them religious things on top of the secular, school curriculum. And there's nothing really I can nitpick about that and say that there's nothing going on wrong here. As long as Matt just said that, governments are not subsidizing this. I don't want my tax dollars to go to a Catholic school the same way I don't want it to go to a Mormon school or a Muslim school. These things should be religiously funded. And if they can't stand on their own monies, then they can just go away. There's a failed business and they should just go away. For the most part, just as long as their kids are getting what they need in order to function in the world, I don't care if it's religious. And I have heard of a few cases of secular, even atheist parents sending their kids to a religious school because the quality of education there for certain subjects is just so much better than anything around them. And they want the best for their kid. So they'll send them to that religious school and just, on the side say, hey, listen, the religious stuff, it's up to you whether to believe that or not, but I encourage you to use critical thinking. I encourage you to scrutinize really what they're saying there. I've heard of cases like that happening before. Nothing really against it.
Yeah, I think, I'd rather there wasn't religion. To the extent of, if one of them could actually demonstrate the truth of, that, I'm fine with something being true. Like, for example, if Matthew had presented a warranted evidence-based case that Christianity in the version that he's invented is true, then I would accept that it's true. Whether or not I would become a member or worship, that's a completely separate story. And so, but I would fully accept that this is a version of a package of beliefs that has been demonstrated to be true, and therefore, congratulations, there's a religion that I may not actually still be in favor of the religion. If the religion is, has problems in some other area, it could be true and not desirable. I mean, cancer exists, but I don't want it. And so if it turns out that that's the case, but by and large, we have religious freedom, which is you get to have your beliefs and you get to teach your preferred beliefs to your offspring. That can be incredibly harmful. And not just from a religious standpoint. This is not just me, dumping on religion. The fact that parents can really fuck up their kids, not just with regard to religion, but with tons of they can inject their bigotry and their hatred and their homophobia and their transphobia and their racism. They can inject all of that into those kids. And sometimes kids manage to grow out of them. I remember there were these little blonde hair, blue eyed girls that were singing like songs and selling their albums about white supremacy to white supremacists and the KKK. They're doing all this stuff. And I was like,
Yikes.
man, I can't wait to see what happens with that. And just, cute little girls who are now, by the way, no longer white supremacists. And so it didn't matter how pretty they were or whether or not they, were good singers. It was the content of the message that was the problem. It was, hey, we're spewing hate that was injected into us, into our brains by our parents. Parents have a lot of power. Similarly, a religious school, it's part of religious freedom for something like that to exist. And if parents want to pay for it, as long as the kids are getting the minimum of what we would expect from a public school, what they get in addition to that is really not my business until there's a demonstration that what they're being taught is harmful to them and or others. As much as it sucks, freedom of speech and freedom of conscience put everyone in a position where you can teach hatred, you can teach bigotry, you can raise your kids to think that left is right and right is left. And then we'll just hope that once they get out from underneath your bizarre experiment, they figure out, oh, I was just taught wrong. And now I have to spend the next, however much time relearning left and right. If you teach your kid that red means go and green means stop, and then turn them loose in a car on the world, you've done something incredibly dangerous and something that we should all stand in opposition to. And it has nothing to do with religion. It's entirely about what's true and what's harmful.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. If you send your kids to a religious school, you got to expect them to eventually come in contact with reality once they're out of that school. And reality is going to self-correct them in a lot of ways. So be prepared for that.
We'll give this a try one more time. Isaiah in Arkansas, are you there?
Yes, Matt, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you so much for waiting. You get to be the final call for today's episode of the Sunday show. So what do you got for us?
Great. I was wondering if I could get y'all's perspective on, is religion inherently dangerous to society?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer.
Religion isn't one thing. There are many different religions. They're not all equally harmful. They're not all equally ridiculous. I can't think of a religion that doesn't have beliefs that I would think are harmful. And I can't think of a religion that doesn't rely on the sort of methodology that would lead people to believe other things that were false and problematic. So I think as a general rule, I'd say religions are almost all likely to be dangerous to society.
It is a good point.
I would,
However, Oh, sorry.
I would, just to put my 2 cents in, I would say I'm on the 50-50 line, but I lean slightly towards inherently dangerous to society, because you can have the most extreme religions, like let's say the Westboro Baptist Church, which is despicable, hate mongering activities and beliefs, and how harmful we can demonstrate that is to society. But then you can also think of probably one of the most benign religions you can think of, that maybe just has a lovey-dovey God, doesn't care what we do. They don't try to legislate their beliefs into law. They don't persecute anybody. Even in a case like that, I still see that as something that is promoting irrationality. And I think irrationality itself is also harmful to society. So I would say that in that sense, all religions, to some degree, even if it's just 0.01% degree harmful to society, they're all harmful to society. So I lean slightly towards yes, but not too much further than that.
I would normally agree as well. I'm sorry, were you saying something?
No, I was just going to say, even the Jains being probably one of the most pacifist, they wear a face covering so that they don't accidentally inhale a bug. I think there are problems with Jainism that are mildly, if not potentially more dangerous to the adherents, which impacts the rest of society. So even in like one of the most benign versions of religion that I can think of, I still have problems with it.
Me personally, I am a Satanist that follows the tenets of the Satanic Temple. Are either of you familiar with that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that doesn't necessarily fall into a theistic religion. And I was really hoping to maybe be able to come up with some idea to get people to acknowledge religion as a dangerous thing, but be able to do it on a solely personal, one-to-one level without putting it out there into the public with it being dangerous. Because I do agree with you that inherently it does seem like a very dangerous thing, and I do lean with trying to get it away from the state and out of schools, because I know that's something that here in the South, in Arkansas, that they were pushing, regardless of it being the public school, they would still push that in school, and it was very hard to deal with growing up.
I'm not going to tell you whether you should do that or not. I think that would be an uphill battle, though, because for any argument you come up with that religion is harmful, like when I was mentioning earlier about Westboro Baptist Church, the person you're trying to change the mind of is probably going to counter with some other religion, like Matt brought up Jainism and others, where it's like, oh, it's not so bad. So you're going to have an uphill battle convincing people of that. You may want to rely on, if there are metrics like this available or statistics like this available about, religiosity's impact on livelihood, outlook, health. We do have state by state, at least in the United States, at least, we have state by state statistics about religiosity versus societal health factors. But on a personal level, whether somebody is better off with their religious belief or without it, that's going to be a much harder thing to pin down.
And I know
it's an interesting thing to ponder, though. No, sorry, go ahead.
I know personally, I think there's a good community-based religion as far as like the Satanic Temple goes, to bring atheists together. And that's something that just being an atheist, there's a lack of community. And I know it's something that me leaving Christianity, that was something very hard for me to do, because it was hard to leave that community.
It's that way for a lot of people. I have it now. First of all, I list Jainism is the most benign of religions, but in actuality, I'm more in agreement with the Satanic Temple than I would ever be with Jains. The Satanic Temple being a secular, non-theistic cosplay club, but I have problems with the Satanic Temple. They're a great ally. I don't have issues. I mean, their 7 fundamental tenets. I only have maybe like nitpicky type issues from, and I can't say that any of them are what I would consider harmful. So maybe this would be the religion that I don't think would be harmful for society, because you could also make a religion that just says don't be harmful to society, in which case then there would be a religion that wasn't, if you were an adherent, you weren't harmful to society. I don't even count the Satanic Temple, because when we're talking about religions, yes, I guess it should count, but I don't count it.
And I can understand the reason why.
I'm not going to be joining it. I think it's a great ally in church-state separation, and I'm supportive of the Satanic Temple. But the very notion of having to spend every day explaining, by Satan, we don't necessarily mean Satan. We're using Satan as a vehicle to stand as, in opposition to the sorts of things that you're rejecting. And oh, by the way, the Satanic Temple isn't the Church of Satan. That's put together by Anton LaVey. It is both a great name and concept and a terrible name and concept, all depending on context. If you want to make sure that Christians don't get to have special treatment at schools that's based on religion, contact the Satanic Temple, because they will try to set up the same special treatment for them, and the Christians will lose their mind over it. And you can stop some of the religious encroachment by pointing out that, hey, if you allow that, you got to allow the Satanic Temple in here. And on that front, it's just amazing. But I couldn't, it's hard enough to just explain atheism, humanism, and skepticism. I'm on these shows weekly for decades, and I can have somebody here and I can say, take a look at that discussion with Matthew earlier. Hey, is a path to truth impacted in any way by whether or not you're alive or dead? No. Then your behavior can't have anything to do with that path to truth. But how much more difficult is all this made by me coming on and saying, by the way, I'm a Satanist, I'm part of the Satanic Temple. All it does is give me more shit to potentially explain. And in fact, I'm not convinced that I might actually prefer the 7 tenets of Satanism to the Secular Humanist Manifesto's current version. The Secular Humanist Manifesto has had 3 different versions, and I've had objections to all of them. Anytime you try to put together a package of beliefs, you're going to find things. Let me just, for the sake of it, let me go through the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple right from their webpage. Number 1, one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. I don't have any issue with that. It just doesn't really clearly dig in on, what reason would say with regard to all creatures. But cool. Let's be compassionate.
I feel like reason would be. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, here's the issue: is everybody in the Satanic Temple a vegan? And what percentage of them consider compassion and empathy toward all creatures to be a reasoned argument for veganism? I don't know. And I'm not trying to get into it now. I just know that there are definitely TST folks who aren't vegans. That's just a fact. So, but you could make that argument. Number 2.
Can I read? You want to alternate readings? I have it here in front of me too.
Yeah, you got it up too. Okay. I didn't know you had it up.
Yeah, I got it right here in front of me. Tenet 2, the struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions.
I'm pretty much in agreement with that. The law isn't the end of it, and neither are institutions. Laws and institutions can be unjust, and so struggling for justice. Yep, I'm completely in line with number 2.
Laws don't line up with morality. We want them to, but many times they don't. And institutions and traditions, times change, and those things should change along with it. If a tradition or institution is beneficial for society one century, but not the next century, then it either needs to change or go away. Because the priority there is justice. I'm behind that.
Number 3, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. Now, I don't think that this necessarily prohibits the state incarcerating someone. It may be simplistic enough that somebody could say, "Ooh, if you imprison me, then you're doing something that's beyond my own will." I don't think. Matter of fact, I think when we get to number 7, it'll be clear that basically number 3 is I have individual sovereignty. There are, of course, reasonable limits, just like there are reasonable limits to free speech stuff. So yes, I'm pretty much in line with number 3.
Tenet 4, the freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own will.
Yeah, I think that the second sentence could end up, there may be a problem there somewhere eventually, but generally speaking, yeah, respect others' freedoms, including the right to the freedom to offend. I will say, I'm in favor of saying you don't have a right to not be offended, and that mere offense may not be criteria for any sort of action, but respecting, I can respect someone's freedom to offend without respecting their choice to offend. The actual choice, not their right to a choice, but yes. So yeah, no big deal. 4, I'm pretty good. Number 5, beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. The second half, I think, is a moral imperative that you shouldn't be distorting science. The first thing is basically scientism. And while I am generally a fan of scientism, I recognize that there are beliefs that aren't conforming to one's best scientific understanding of the world, because science may not, sort of the aesthetic preferences or believing, it's not that you're anti-science, it's that there are beliefs that you can be convinced of that aren't the result of a scientific understanding. But yeah.
Yeah. And just to kind of refer back to our callers, Ray, Allison, Jay, John, Matthew, take note of Tenet 5 here, because this is usually the problem we have with when discussing whether we should believe a God or not with theists, is because they are trying to generally lead the evidence to their conclusion rather than allowing the evidence to lead them to the conclusion.
Right.
So yeah, because objective reality is there, and it's something, not to get too philosophical, but I think objective reality is there. I think we all experience one reality, is maybe from different perspectives. But we need to be careful to unify and check each other as we navigate reality, so we can come to truthful conclusions. And the best way to do that, demonstrated so far, I think, is a scientific method. If there's better methods out there, I've yet to see one. I would love to see it if it is there. But we should keep that in mind and not allow our fanciful, desires, our want for hope, meaning, and purpose, our neediness to influence our conclusions, because our emotions will lead us wrong. Okay, number 6, people are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. Yeah. I'm all for that.
Yep. And the last one, number 7, which actually I like the fact that in reality, I was like, why would they have 7 tenets instead of 6? If you're just going to go down the whole Satan thing and you're not going to do 10, why did you go for 7 when you go for 6? But 7 is every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. So basically, number 7 is, yeah, all the rest of them are basic guidelines, and you need to implement them using compassion, wisdom, and justice. So it's not like a true 7th.
I recently read a book called Atheist Mind, Humanist Heart. And Paulogia and I actually did a collaboration on this about a month ago, but anyway, this is the book right here, Atheist Mind, Humanist Heart. And it puts forward 10 humanist, secular non-commandments. They're not commandments or like these tenets. They're just guidelines. And the very, very last one, which is it jives very well with this one, the very last one after all 9 non-commandments are given, it says here, beliefs are subject to revision because the more experiences you have in life, the more data you have to draw on, and the more likely you are to form accurate conclusions. I'm sorry, that wasn't the actual one. But basically, it basically goes... Oh, here, I'm sorry. I read the wrong one. My bad. Here's the actual 10th non-commandment. All our beliefs are subject to change. All our beliefs are subject to change in the face of new evidence, including these non-commandments. But basically, we can do our best as humans. Yeah, we can do our best as humans with our incomplete data, our incomplete methodologies, our incomplete tools. We're doing our best. But we have to recognize that these are incomplete and that any conclusions we reach are tentative. They can be changed. Maybe something tomorrow, one day, will completely upend evolution, the theory of evolution, or completely upend logic. Or I can't imagine what that would look like, and I highly doubt that'll happen. But if it does happen, and we have good evidence, and we can trust this evidence, that we need to follow it. We can't say, well, I'm really attached to evolution, or I'm really attached to this form of, propositional logic or whatever. You can't say that and then ignore the evidence, which is what a lot of people do. Earlier. Yeah. So anything's up for change as long as it can be supported by the evidence and tools and methodology.
Yeah, I agree with y'all entirely. I don't think either of us disagree on anything. I'll definitely be trying to reach out and see if I can get some of this religiosity out of some of these southern schools. But I really appreciate y'all taking my call, and I love the show. This has been a bit of a dream of mine to get to talk to y'all.
Well, thanks so much for calling, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about Satanism and actually read through their 7 tenets in case there's somebody out there who might actually be more interested in that. I'm gonna let you go now, Isaiah, but I really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Isaiah.
We're about out of time. We're gonna wrap up here in just a minute. A couple things real quick. First of all, I'm not going to be a Satanist, shouldn't dissuade anyone else who feels compelled to participate with the Satanic Temple, because like Oasis or Sunday Assembly or any of those groups, there are gatherings and there is a community. And if it's the type of community that you're looking for, absolutely go. My objections to the Satanist thing are on record that have nothing to do with their tenets or their community. I have loads of friends who identify as Satanists, and Aron's a Satanist and was messaging me from every little Satanist gathering that they were at. That's all great. And yeah, when I list in the future which religions I think are probably the least harmful, instead of going to Jainism right off the bat, I'll probably just go to Satanism right off the bat, and then only have to make the distinction between TST and LaVeyan Satanism.
And before any theists or Christians say, oh, look, Matt and Eric are shilling for Satanism, they believe in Satan, notice how these tenets don't at all mention Satan or anything supernatural or any appeals to some higher being. That's because your typical Satanist temple member does not believe in those things. In general, the Satanic Temple, it was created to combat religious influence in our laws and our governments and our schools. This is specifically a counter measure created to navigate the legal system, to stay legal, to challenge things like 10 Commandments in schoolhouses, Christian displays in courthouses. There's a very real objective to counter the bad influences of religion in the world, and that's what the Satan's Temple is really at its core. And if I need to nitpick something negative about the Satanist Temple, or the Satanic Temple, it galvanizes certain Christians even more so against atheism and thinking critically, because they'll latch on to, oh, Satanism, that's bad. I was told about this.
Yeah,
like these, So yeah, and that's not necessarily a problem with the temple itself. That's a problem with people not being critically and using their critical thought. But
in a rational world,
I mean, no, but
in a rational world, you should be able to say, "Oh yeah, I'm a member of the Satanic Temple," and if somebody's like, "Wait, does that mean you worship Satan?" Nah. This is the label for this, and it's boom, 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 and you would be done. But unfortunately, we live in a world where I just saw a bunch of statistics where fully 49% of people think the world is the exact opposite of the way we can show it is. Like, are we at a 30-year high for unemployment right now or a 30-year low for unemployment right now? Fully 49% of the population gets the wrong answer to that question, and a bunch of others. And so when we can't have conversations to get people to acknowledge that their behavior doesn't impact whether an epistemology is sound or not. It just, Satan is an additional hoop to jump through that I just don't have the time for. Plus, I'm not as keen on some of the metal as some of my friends are. I'm just messing with you. I'm having fun. You know what I find interesting, Eric? A minute ago, you did something that I almost never do. And yet I realized that you were doing the same thing that I could do, which is that, today we had Ray, Allison, Jay, John, Matthew, all his callers up to, and then Isaiah. And we know that because you and I are taking notes. Like, just without going into specifics, of all the callers, who do you have the most notes on? Who's taking up more page space?
I think Ray from North Carolina has the largest chunk of my notebook right now.
Oddly enough, Ray has the largest for me as well, despite the fact that I think if I expanded Matthew's, it would actually be more. It's like it was easier to take notes and condense the things with Matthew. And we were on with Matthew for like almost an hour.
Yeah. Matthew's like very, very small, maybe like 2 sentences, not even.
Oh, I have much more than that for Matthew, but I don't have, like, Ray takes up a lot of space because there was, he called in, but he's never called in. And then there's evidence that should be compelling about technology. And then it's, here's my reasons, the Bible, the teachings of the church, the personal relationship, and the communication, which I can tell through his deeds, his studies of metaphysics, his dog diagnosis with cancer. I've got all those notes for that. For Matthew, I took good notes. And so I actually probably have more written down, but it doesn't take up as much space. Like it's like 12 lines as opposed to 20 lines with Ray.
Yeah. I think for Ray was giving us some good details. He gave us, like, I got at least 2 bullet point lists here about his account about his dog and his criteria for why he's a Christian. When Matthew early on hit the circular reasoning point, and then we went around the circle, I think 2 more times. And at that point I stopped taking notes because I'm like, we're just, treading old territory here again. So yeah, but no, I think Ray has the biggest chunk, and I was probably the most engaged in the conversation, because if I'm engaged in the conversation, I'm gonna take more notes.
Yeah, it's the way it is on a lot of stuff. So first of all, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today for the Sunday show. And there's another episode of the Sunday show after dark coming up here in 2 hours, or just less than 2 hours. That's going to feature Aron Ra and John Gleason. Monday, Skeptalk is Erika Gibbon and John Gleason. Tuesday's Chewed Gum is Arden and Alyssa. Wednesday on the Hang Up, it's myself and Arden. And Thursday, it's going to be Luxender and Dr. Ben, leading up to next Sunday's 2 p.m. Sunday show with Jimmy Snow and Erika Gibbon. I'm just happy. I love seeing Erika on so many shows this week in particular, and that I get to do a show on Wednesday with Arden. Anything going on with you that you need to direct people towards before I give the final stuff?
Nothing really. I'm wrapping up a couple personal projects, and I hope to be more active on my actual YouTube channel here in the near future. But I am doing occasional live streams on Wednesday evenings at around 6:30. So if you see that, hop in and say hi. I accept calls on that show as well. And tonight I'll be appearing
while I'm on.
Yes, exactly. I just want to direct competitor you. No,
I'm gonna make a call. I'm gonna call into your live stream from mine.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be so great. We can maybe let's find something we disagree on, and we can actually go against each other. Like, I don't know, Star Trek versus Star Wars, or something silly like that.
Which one do you prefer?
Oh man, they're both. It's kind of apples and oranges, but I think they've both gone downhill lately. It's hard to tell. I think Star Trek.
Yeah,
I got better memories of Star Trek.
Okay, then we agree. I think Star Trek, so that's not going to be it.
Okay. There you go. And then otherwise tonight, I'm appearing on my Atkinson's channel for Bad Science Sunday. It's where we watch a really bad pseudoscience YouTube schlock crap video and just drink and laugh at it. So that'll be sometime, I think 6:30 p.m. tonight at Pacific Standard Time. So that's what I'm doing. But yeah, pleasure as always, Matt. Had a really good time. It was great calls. And
me too. And a huge thank you to everybody who watched. Thanks to our call screeners. Thanks to the moderators in chat. If you look down below this, you'll find links to a bunch of other stuff. I know that there was over 3,000 people watching at one point, which means there's probably 10,000 individuals that have watched and tuned in at different points. And yet there's only 1,100 likes right now, which means you all need to click the like, click the subscribe. You can join the channel to get various benefits there as well. Patreon.com/calltheline and linemerch.com are the primary ways that you can go there. There's all of our producers. Don't forget about all the other shows on the network. And you know what? Give the Satanist, the Satanic Temple, a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's Matthew's argument for Jesus being true, is he gave it a try and it worked, give the Satanic Temple a try. And if it works for you, maybe we found the truth.
Or if it doesn't work out, maybe throw them a few bucks. They'll combat some church state